another meeting, and Susan's going to chair that, and Ann Webster is absent and has asked Susan to chair that, so.
We're going to call a quick meeting of the Board of Civil Authority to raise the question of setting the 154 Creek Road, the Middlebury Recreation Center Gymnasium as the polling location for the November 8th general election. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Perfectly.
Anne prepared a bunch of information in case people have questions. She noted that the new gymnasium is, oh, I'm sorry, so I need to call the meeting to order. And the new gymnasium is large enough to accommodate any percentage of voters that turn out for this election. We have 4,930 registered voters. It was her understanding that both Creek Road and the Rec Center parking lot will be paved by that by the November time.
All done.
And there you go. And that she understands that lighting has been installed and this will improve accessibility. Dustin Hunt has scheduled to close the gym to all activities from Saturday, November 5th through Wednesday morning, November 9th. She has worked with Eric Kennison on a plan to transport the equipment and set up the gym. And she's also going to be talking with Top Floor to make sure that they have proper internet connection in order to access all the Secretary of State sites for managing the checklist and election night reporting. She plans to get the word out about the polling location through the town's website, the weekly email blasts, posted signs, MCTV notices, and the Addy and Front Porch Forum. And she is asking for any additional suggestions would be gratefully received. Early voting has already started and will take place at 77 Main Street at the clerk's office during regular office hours. And she will also be open for voting on the Friday prior to the election, but be closed Monday, November 7th, in order to prepare for the election day. Are there any questions?
So motion.
Looking for a motion to
Move to.
yeah. Set 154 Creek Road.
154, yes, 154 Creek Road is the official polling location.
Yep, for the November 8th general election.
Federal election.
Thank you, that was great. Is there a second? Thank you, Donna. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody, and I will adjourn the meeting now and send it back to the official select board meeting. Sorry, Laura, you missed all the fun.
She voted. Okay, so 7:03, I'm going to call the select board meeting of Tuesday, September 27th to order. And first item of business is approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve. I'd like to deal with our August 23rd select board site visit to the Adirondack View property first. Has everybody had a chance to review those?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes from August 23rd site visit at Adirondack View as submitted.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any changes? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
And I'm abstaining because I wasn't there.
And we have one abstention, and that's Nick, who was absent. Okay. The next set of minutes is for our September 13th select board meeting. And are there any amendments?
To move, maybe adopted.
Move for adoption. Seconded?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any changes?
I don't have any.
I didn't find anything. I thought they were great.
Perfect. All in favor of approving the minutes as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Abstained.
And
I
we
wasn't
have
there.
Donna was absent, and 6 abstained. Okay, so, next item of business, approval of the agenda. Don't have any changes that I know of, but is there any? Okay,
Nope.
here none. Motion to approve the agenda?
Move.
Move to approve the agenda?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda as submitted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, citizen comments, and this is, if there's something that's not on the agenda, and Mike, yours is first on the agenda after this. Is there anything else that somebody's here for? Okay, so the first item of business is Mike Davis would like to talk to us about a water line issue, and if you could come forward, Mike, and maybe the select board has got in their packet not only your letter, but some other correspondence with individuals. I don't know if you looked at the select board packet, everything that's submitted.
I
in
did
there,
not, no.
but probably I think I'd first like to have you just kind of give a quick overview of what,
Okay.
how you feel.
As,
Okay.
Excuse me, Mike, I'm gonna recuse myself from this subject. Just,
Okay.
to err on the side of caution. And so, would you like me to remove myself from the table, or just be quiet?
No, just being quiet is fine.
Which is easier?
I might have to get up. I might have to get up.
Oh, this is gonna be a good meeting, I can see.
so,
Sorry.
as you've probably all seen my letter to Kathleen regarding the water leak on Munson Road, it was discovered, I guess, about August 30th, and reported to the town, I think, on the 30th. And not known by any of the four houses that are serviced by that main, we didn't understand that we may own that water main. It's not in my deed, and it isn't in any of the other three property owners' deeds, any mention of that water line. And I've owned other property in Middlebury, and certainly when you're told you're on town water, it's kind of understood that you're responsible from your curb stop to your house. From the curb stop out belongs to the town. And that certainly is what we all understood or thought at the time. And I called DPW, I think probably around the 5th, the week of the 5th, to inquire about when the leak was going to be fixed, and it spoke to Patty at the reception desk there, and she said she'd get back to me. And then on my way back to work from my house at lunchtime, on or about the week of the 15th, the town was there. Will Glenn was there, and he explained to me that, again, that we probably own the line, and that we're responsible for paying for it. So you can imagine that four landowners, not knowing that they own something that they're responsible for, trying to get them together and agree to repair a line, and then getting the money off them is kind of is going to be a mess. You can see it coming. So I then went down to the Department of Public Works to look at what I was told was the book, which apparently is a book that has all the information on individually owned water lines in the town and the village of Middlebury, and got into the Munson Road section, and there was no agreement, any written agreement between any of the property owners on Munson Road and the town on who owned or who did not own that land. So, and in the meantime, I have discussed this with Paul Carrera, who used to live on that land. He owned the last house on the property, and he informed me that he installed that line in 1962 along with Bud Palmer. They put up the money to do that, and they put it in per town specs with the assumption that the town would take the line over once they installed it. And in the book, there was a written note from Paul that he wrote to the town, I think Dave Crawford, back in on or about around 1979, stating that fact, that he assumed that the town owned that line. So I guess there doesn't appear to be any written agreement other than I guess that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some agreement, that written agreement that the town has, that we own that water line and not the town. Because certainly the 4 property owners had no idea whatsoever that they owned that line. It was kind of, it was a shock to all of us. And in the meantime, the water still runs down the road. Nothing's being done.
Dan, could you bring us up to speed on the, how the town views this?
Sure. I can just.
You can stay if you just scoot you
Yeah.
over.
So this is the book, and in it is all the private water lines that the town was able to, I guess, find in 1979. So at one point, there was a village water system and a town water system, and they came together and became the water department, or the town's bigger water system. And when that happened, Dave Crawford, as he mentioned, was the town manager at the time. The board asked them to figure out who owns what in some of these outlying areas that were not in the village area of the town. And so a lot of work was done to try and find if there were agreements or deeds that a water line that was put in outside in the rural areas, if that was deeded to the town. If it wasn't, it was determined by the board to be a private water line. And so at the time, in 1979, there was 30-some private water lines that were determined to be private. And so some of the documentation that I gave you was the process, and there's a town policy for that. And since I've been here and before that, if there was any question about whether a rural line, if you want to call it that, was town-owned or private, we went to the book. And so, and some of the documentation that he has is directly from that. So the town sent out letters to owners, property owners that may share a line, and see if they recall anything about it. So there's a lot of data or information that was tried to mine from previous owners, current owners, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the gist of it. We've used this as the rules for whether a line was private or not. And I'm sure there are people who do not know that they have a private water line. And there would not be an agreement with the town because there would not be one necessary because it's private. And so it does not surprise me that people may not know that they are on a private water line. And so the physics of this water line, water leak, we think it's either a 2-inch or an 1.5 inches. There's conflicting evidence in this book. And so it's probably a union, a brass union, where they ran a length of copper tubing, ran out of the roll of it, put a brass union on, connected the next one, and the next line, and went down the street. So it's a copper line. It's not a function of it's split, it's broke, or not broke, but unless there's a rock laying on it, it's most likely a brass union that has failed. And that's the extent of it. I mean, we're not looking at replacing the water line. A copper line should be in service for decades, serviceability for decades. So that's kind of the history.
How often do we have issues on these private lines, and you say we had 30, was there an indication that we've assumed responsibility for some of these, or what's gone on as far as on other issues that we've had as a result of these private lines?
Sure. I think since I've been here, there's probably been 3 or 4 of these questions that come up. And the most frequently is Peterson Terrace up North Weybridge area, because it's kind of been a leaky line. And so the frequency sometimes helps dictate or remind people who owns it, because they're dealing with it more frequently. And so when you have a situation like this where it comes up once in 40 years, it's not on anybody's radar screen. And so it doesn't happen often, but well, the other line out that's more frequently has issues is Munger Street. Goes down to past the Hyder residence, former governor's house. You know, they share a line, and they've had leaks on it, and they've come together. They know it, and they come together and they fix it. And I think recently, a couple of years ago, they replaced a section, several feet of it, you know, to get rid of the problem.
We've never felt that we had an obligation to inform the people who are currently on in those properties that they have a private line. I mean, I just don't know, as taxpayers of the community, to all of a sudden have something break down that you have no knowledge about. If we've known that and there are only 30-plus people or 30-plus lines listed, isn't there some way we could have reached out to them and let people know that they're actually on a private line and not a public line?
Well, let me clarify. When this book was put together, there's 30-some odd lines. I don't know how many there are now, because some have been upgraded by, you know, large water main projects, you know, College Street, for instance. So I don't know how many private water lines there are, but there's probably about similar quantity. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea that the town would do this, to remind people that they do own a private line, and it's their responsibility.
And somehow to put it so that they can't be conveyed without the next owner, so you don't have to keep repeating that. There must be something we can put in as a document, whether, I don't know where, their tax bill or their deed or wherever, that you could state that they're on a private line. It should not be a surprise to the next owner if the previous owner sold it without informing them. I mean, there must be some way you can actually control this information.
Can we put it on the water bill, private line service?
And I want to say something.
I think Victor was.
Well, I mean, it seems to be, as far as responsibility, when you sell a house, you're supposed to inform the person you sell it to whether there are such things as, like, you're on a private water line and so on and so forth. I'm not sure that the responsibility is the town's, but I think it would be a very good idea that the town go through this book and let everyone know who's currently living in these locations that, by the way, you have a private water line. I mean, that's I had a private water line when I lived on Halpin Road. It wasn't in the deed, but we had to inform the person who bought the house. I mean, there is, I think, that, I mean, that sort of truth of the product that you're selling, that someone should know when you're passing a piece of property on to someone else that, by the way, you have town water, but the water line that's bringing this to your house is a private line, and which, of course, is part of the obligation. I mean, it seems to be a very difficult thing, and I think it's very unfortunate when I look at, you know, it's in the right of way, and one may just generally assume that, well, it must be a town line. I would assume that, I suppose, if no one told me.
Paul?
Yeah. It was about 54 years ago when that line was built, and things operated a little differently back in those days. But when we approached the water department to decide how we were going to get water service at our house, the option was if there was a private line across the street, and as you well know, in those days, a lot of private lines were not in the right-of-way. They ran across lots and through fields and whatever. So we discussed it with the town initially it was myself and Bud Palmer. And there were no other houses on our side of the street at that time. But we came to an agreement with the town that we would put in a line to their requirement to furnish a number of houses, and I forgot how many it was then, because Bud Palmer owned all the land from my house to Route 116. But the agreement was that we would put in to the town's requirement a 2-inch copper line, soft copper, which at that time was a little unusual. But it served the needs of myself and Bud. And the agreement was that we would put it in the town right away, and the lots that it passed would have access to that. It was always our feeling, and I'm sure the water department at that time, that that was their line. And we were extending it down to 116. And at that point in time, the town had a water line that came from Palmer Springs down 116 that ended just north of Munson Road. And that line's been in there for over 50 years. And we've been paying the same rate as everybody else in town. The water line is in the right-of-way. It was built exactly the way the town asked to have it built. And we always assumed at that time that that was a town. And it's a little different than a private line that meanders through a field or something.
Yeah,
This
I know what you
built
mean.
the town specs on the town right-of-way with the most modern material. Was a big tumble at that point. It was not plastic or anything else. So that's, I don't know of any written agreements anywhere. At that time, I think probably there were very few written agreements on water lines. But, and it's been, to my knowledge, relatively maintenance-free. So the town's had a pretty good deal for 4 houses that have been paying their water bills.
Yeah,
Do we know what the repair cost is for the problem?
Excuse me?
Dan?
Did you have a chance
I
to
did,
call?
yeah.
About 1,500 bucks or something?
No, 5,000.
Uh,
We've got 3 estimates.
I have four
Four
estimates
actually.
that range from $2,500 to $4,300, and all of those estimates have, I was told they're budget estimates. I mean, that water's been leaking for almost a month now, and that's sandy soil in there, so when they go to dig that out, instead of being a nice little hole 6 feet down, they have the potential to be a huge hole, because the sand's saturating, it's gonna wanna cave in, so they're gonna have to get that out of there. So, my guess is that it's gonna cost a minimum of $5,000 and maybe more, and I don't really wanna, I'm not worried about one of my neighbors, but the 2 other neighbors are absentee landowners, and I've gotta get money from them. I mean, it would seem, to me, it's still not definitive on who owns that land. There was a letter written, it's in the book, by Dave Crawford, stating that it may be a private line. What can you tell me about it? And Paul responded back, basically what he just said, and there was no response that we've seen back from the town answering his response. So I guess I'm not really clear whether it is a private line. I mean, I'm still kind of convinced it's a town line, but, I mean, I've done my due diligence to go out and get some estimates, per Dan's letter saying we need to come up with a plan by September 30th. to try to get it repaired. I mean, I've, gone out and looked.
I do want to
Wait-
talk to.
Wait a second, I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think she had something to say.
I'm Colleen Brown. My husband and I own what used to be Paul Carrera's house, so I'm one of the 4 people on this line. And my concern is, sort of echoing what you've heard a little bit already, is, Dan shared with me the book, and I have the same documents that have been put up on the screen, but the problem is that there's no copy of any actual agreement. So all we know is that this letter went out, which I just got a copy of today, from David Crawford. And then Paul's letter back saying, essentially, we built it to specs, assuming that was what we needed to do to have it be a town line, and then nothing back. And so to the extent that the town did reach some agreement with some people, there isn't any record of that. And so to say that because we didn't get a response, that means there is an agreement, is not a very sound way of establishing that these are private lines. And my concern is that it's not in any of our deeds. And, as Victor said before, if it was Paul Carrera's line, then when he deeded the property to me, it would have been in that deed. But since he assumed it belonged to the town, it didn't get deeded. So right now, it's very unclear who actually has ownership of this line. There's no line sharing agreement in the title records. There's nothing to indicate it's owned by any of us. And, I'm concerned about the passage of time, because as the water continues to leak, not only are we wasting water, we're allowing the expense to increase. And there is a provision in the town's policy to the effect that if there is a situation where a line needs to be replaced to get it up to spec, the town and the private line owners will split that cost 50-50. This is not upgrading it because we've already built it. Well, Paula already built it up to spec. But I would like to see some more research done and some, thoughtful approach about how do we decide who owns this line. I mean, I don't think the fact that the town has no record of responding is an indication that somehow Paul's assumption was flawed and his argument was rejected and it's somehow deemed a private line. And so I'm wondering whether the town would repair the line, just so we get it done and we don't have any more expense or damage or wasted water, and then go forward. And if it turns out that it's a private line, bill us each a quarter of the cost and we'll pay it. If it turns out it's the town's line, it's fixed and we're done. But I just don't think looking at the notebook is a sufficient way to determine who owns this line when there's no public record to establish it. And I just hate to see it continue to deteriorate. I mean, it's a problem.
Susan?
This isn't an uncommon situation in water systems all over the state and the country. And I'm very sympathetic, but at the same time, the fact that there is a book is amazing. That there is research and everything else. And because records weren't taken very well over the years, to have done the research, to have something in the book is the record. So the fact that the system came into existence and it was taken over and it was delineated by the village. I mean, I'm a certified water system operator. I've worked in East Middlebury, so I don't have a lot of experience, but I've heard many stories from other water system operators, and I've had to deal with this myself. It's awkward. The book is kind of golden. I mean, that's what you have to go with at a certain point. Unfortunately, it would be nice to, going forward, to inform people, but there's nothing in a deed. There's stuff written in a book. It's a private water line. You're supposed to sort of talk about that when you pass along your house. And you know, there's times where people tap on, you let them tap on, they kind of do a nice thing, and then everybody forgets about it for 50 years. And that's unfortunate. And then nobody thinks about it until something goes wrong. I mean, I understand what you're talking about, and maybe there's more research out there that you would like to do, but the question is the line private or not? And according to the records that we have kept all this time, it is. If someone can prove to me that it isn't, and I can't go by an assumption, I would like to do that, that I've dealt with many people over the years who say, well, we assume that it would be okay, but unless you get it changed in the book, then that doesn't happen. And so, again, you're dealing with the record. You know, that is the record that we have, and so I'm hesitant. You know, to even have a book is an amazing thing for many water systems. They don't even have that. So to have done the research, to have it in the book, and to say that these are all the private ones, it needs to be updated. We should be informing people, but I don't know. You know, if it is a private line, there are other choices, and we could talk about upgrading and splitting the cost and all those kind of things. But I think an upgrading at this point, the specs in 1962 are not the specs for today. And so you may wind up, if that's the way you want to go, spending even more money than you would to, you know, just repair it and walk away. So, but again, the question to me, are we going to honor that the line is private or not? Yes or no, and that determines the next question of what we're going to do.
Hold on 1 second. Quick question before, have we set precedent before repairing a private line and then billing? Have we ever set that precedent?
Not since I've been here. I don't recall.
It's always
ever
been
doing
done with contract or separate contract.
Yeah, because because we don't own it, so
Right.
we don't get involved.
Okay, Mike, you were next.
Well, I mean, again, this was in the book, and, you know, it was a letter written by the former town manager, and I'll just get to the bottom of it. I don't know if you've all read this or not, but the final paragraph says, any information we find, including an informal title search of your property, and the response you provide us with will be presented to the town or to the Middlebury Selectboard. They will then use this information to make a final decision as to the ownership of the water line in question. This was given to Paul Carrera.
Here's my one assumption on that, Mike, is the fact that it got stuck into the private line. They made a determination. They just didn't do a good job of communicating.
Right.
Well,
So
no,
I think we're making some gross assumptions here. We've got to rule on something that's somehow got put into the private water line book and wasn't communicated back to the property owners. I think that's pretty clear. That somebody ruled on it and said this is private, and they got put in there, and they did a poor job of following through. So, you know, I think Paul's made some good points here, but let's.
I think Victor's before I am.
Well, you haven't spoken yet, Don, have you?
I spoke
You
once.
did? Okay, Victor?
He did
Well,
too.
I mean, you know, what I'm concerned about is I mean, I think Susan's made some very good points, and I agree with them, that perhaps, and I don't know, I haven't looked at the book, and maybe it's an anomaly that this is in the public right-of-way. I mean, and I can see that having a water line in the public right-of-way would, perhaps one might infer from that, it's a town water line built according to standards that now no longer apply. My concern in all of this is that we have a lot of, looks at the size of that book, quite a few private water lines, and I think that if we start precedents of saying we're going to share costs whenever there's a broken line, and that the town has to assume a responsibility for notifying people, I think is placing I think, a burden on the town that really should belong to the property owners who pass the property on to those they sell it to, and not for the town. However, I suppose one could say, and just looking at the documents, that given the fact that it was in the public right-of-way and it was built according to approved specifications, that maybe there was a misunderstanding, and from the very beginning it was intended to be, at that time, in 1962, it wasn't the town of Middlebury, right? It was. I mean, this was before the. It wasn't in the village at the time, so. But I mean, and I think Paul's remark that things were different and informal and so on and so forth in those days and so on could lead one to say maybe it should be regarded as a public water line. But I'm sort of made anxious by that because it doesn't follow specifications right now, and there would be an even larger cost to the town. So I mean, I think it's a very, I mean, it needs a Solomonic decision, and I'm not sure I can see one on the horizon. But I think Susan makes good points. We have a policy of determining what are private water lines, and I don't think, simply say, well, I'm persuaded by that.
Donna?
Well, I think the point is that we don't have a policy. I think we have a book, which is great. I think we could maybe look at this as an opportunity. That the incident has come up and it presents us with the opportunity. The policy committee keeps looking at old policies and stuff that hasn't been touched for 30 and 40 years. And this keeps going on in many, many areas of the town. We should look at it as an opportunity to correct something which, as a system, is probably not a very good one. If we have all of that in a book, I think we certainly should take it upon ourselves as a policy that we are going to notify people about this. At that point, I think it becomes, if it's still a private line, I don't know, maybe there's an option or something in there that what it would cost to convert it to be part of a public line. But at the very least, due diligence. I mean, in fairness to people, I think our due diligence is that we're responsible for handling that book now that it's been brought to our attention. Now that we know that this is unclear, we ought to do something about it. In terms of the resolution of cost, I don't know. Maybe we share the cost on this particular one as an isolated, not as a precedent for going forward with private lines, but at the very least try to share the cost on the fact that it's come up. There could be, I don't know, in my opinion, there's a shared fault in this, and that it's unclear, and that the town should step up and say, hey, we don't think this is fair to you either. Going forward, we're going to try to resolve this for all the other people who are in that book and not let it happen again. I just think we have an opportunity to do the right thing.
I just want to clarify some thoughts that Victor had. Just because it's in the right-of-way doesn't really matter if it's private or public. We have private lines on here that are in the public right-of-way, or in the highway right-of-way. That was probably done because it was easier to put it to put it in the town right away than to get 3 or 4 property owners to agree to let somebody have an easement on it. If there was an easement, it probably would have been a part of the record that would have been easily traced. So we do have private water lines that are in town right away, and it really has no reference as far as whether it makes it private or public. And so what because the 3 pages that I sent off are from the town's policy book. So that the effort back in 1979 was to try to clarify who owns what. If there was no documentation, it was therefore called private. And so that's what we've been operating under for since 1979. So there wouldn't be any agreements that are traceable. And if you think you're going to go try to find new information, I don't think there is any new information, because they did a heck of a job digging through records at that point. So here we are.
The one thing I would add is that in addition to the fact that this is a sort of fuzzy system for making the determination. My understanding from talking to Dan is that there are still issues now where, at least as I understand it, if there are criteria, they're not very clear about when some lines that are put in by private property owners become town lines and when they remain private. And so I would encourage the town, if it's going to look at that policy, to try to articulate what those clear criteria are, so that when there are some developments in town that went up later and people put in private lines and the town took them over, and there are some other places where people put in private lines and the town said, no, we won't take them over. At least as I understood my conversation with Dan, there's nothing particular in writing, which again makes it harder here, because some people didn't respond to the inquiries at all, as I understand it, that David Crawford sent out. And then other people, like Paul, responded with very specific explanations about why he thought it was a town line when he put it in. So to me, those are different scenarios, but yet they both end up in the book. So it's, I think, really difficult to make sense of.
The way I'm hearing this, it's two different issues. We have, for whatever reasons, through history, this array of lines that have been put in, and they were, through assumption or recording or whatever, there's not consistency. And so we end up with this situation. So in that respect, I'm wondering if there isn't a one-time opportunity to, whether entering into the deeds and sending notices to those people who have this private line to make them aware that in fact they have a private line, and it gets recorded into the deed as such. So it's the one time for that, so we can at least try to right some of these past errors. And then the second issue is the problem at hand. We're losing water. Solve that. So is there a way that we can at least get our crews over there and correct this flaw as a one-time, as Donna, I think Donna said, it was a one-time issue to resolve it. So at least we could stabilize the condition and not have it continuing to get worse. So that's how I'm seeing this thing here.
Paul?
I'd just like to mention that there's no question in my mind that we assume that the town accepted that water line, or the water department accepted that water line as theirs. It's entirely in the town right away. Through the years, we've never been approached by any other costs for this line. The town actually cut it into their main at the very beginning and never charged us for it. And they extended the water main down 116 and relocated that connection so that I don't understand why all of a sudden now, and I've never been informed that this was a private line. I've never been notified that they were going to change this line when they did. So that I just assumed from all that this is a town line. And I don't understand. I think there's an issue here. Did the selectmen decide this wasn't a town line? I don't know anything about that.
If I may, determination of ownership. Water lines are considered private in any of the following cases. Lines outside the village corporate limits as of June 30, 1966, which this line would have been. No deed in the village water department exists, and the main is not part of the basic village water department's transmission system. Generally, these lines will be smaller than 6 inches in size. That's the parameter that the select board decided. This is what is going to, small lines smaller than 6 inches are going to be private, and 6 inches and above are going to be public. That determination made in that policy is what has been driving how we've been operating with this information.
But Dan, if I could follow up, I thought when I asked you the other day, you said that subsequent to that date, the town has in fact taken over lines that were private as of then.
I don't think that's not quite correct.
I thought you
Yeah.
said there were certain lines like South Ridge and places like that that the town
That
had
have
to
been
over.
upgraded and changed.
South Ridge was never private. South Ridge was always public. It was built to, state, well, if you want to call them the state standards, AWWA standards, and accepted by the town. There are some places in here where the private line no longer exists because a large water main went down the street and the whole geography, and actually geography, the neighborhoods were built. So they're kind of superseded by just the requirement to have larger water lines.
Hey, Dan, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, are there curb boxes for each house, or is there just one on the end near the main?
I believe there's one for each.
One for each,
There's
okay.
curb stops for each house.
For each house, okay.
And there's a main valve where it comes off what is now, I think, a 12-inch line or a 10-inch line on the
Right.
west side of 116.
Right, so when the 12-inch line went down 116, we re-tapped them into
Right
that
into the main.
service line back into the
Right.
water main. So
Mhm.
that's what you
I'm
do.
just trying to get a sense of what's under the ground,
Yeah.
so, okay.
Paul, did you have something else?
I'd just like to say that the line was built totally on town property. There's no way we could deed it to anybody. They made the connection to the new water line. They actually built a manhole or something there for it. And never attempted to charge us or anything except the water bill. And that, I don't see how you could assume that that was not a town line.
That's also very common, so, I just,
The connect.
I feel for everybody, and I see what Don is saying about, going forward. I'm also looking at a book, that's probably at the bottom of our ability for staff to get to that and notify everybody. Like, how are we gonna do all that without actually honoring what's in the book already? How do you do that without, if you're not gonna honor what's in the book, then you'd have to do all the research all over again. I just have, it's common. This is what happened. And the record keeping is right there. That's what it looks like. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's what the record keeping looks like.
Yeah, I was going to say that it does feel bad because it looks like you had a lot of evidence that showed that the town owned the line because they didn't charge you, blah, blah, like that, but I guess you got lucky. And that the book is indicating that it still is a private line. And I'm interested in policy going forward, so if you do discover, and I see what Susan's point, that it'd be a lot of work for staff, and maybe we can get to that, but I'm not sure. We got a lot of work that the staff is doing to go through that book and notify homeowners or property owners of that. But if you did become aware that you have a private line and you wanted to become public, what would the process be for that, and being clear about that, So that, I would be very interested in working on that.
I would hate to put on the town the responsibility of notifying every property owner in that book. And it seems to me there would be a much easier way simply of sending out, either with a tax bill or advertising in the newspaper, that property owners are advised that they should determine whether their water line is public, or the main that's delivering it to their house and so on is public or private. And I think there is a public responsibility that we can bring to them and simply tell people, look, we have these two kinds of line. If you're not sure whether your line is public or private, I don't think we should tell Kathleen, look, you've got to get someone to go through this book and send letters out to everyone. But it seems to me that someone could come in and ask if their line is in the book, and if it is, then they have a private water line. They may not have known it. I think that's something that people should be advised they need to find out. But I guess I don't feel, I feel very bad about this, and I would like to say, let's call it a public line because it's in the public right-of-way, and there was maybe a misunderstanding or something like that at the beginning. But I think that if we start saying, well, gee, we should have done this before, and we had a responsibility to notify people, we're opening a can of worms. That's a big book, and there are a lot of people who may have leaks and not know it, and I think that it's, if we make a decision, we're setting a precedent, and I think that we can't do that in a cavalier way. I think that there's to say I don't know what to do. I'd like to do something that would make everyone happy. I really
And
would,
Quick
but
question,
I don't see.
if I can, just quick question, and we're talking around and around about this notification and everything. Do you and your system have, are they tagged somehow in our system that that's on a private line? Like that account's on a private line? No. It's not until you have a leak and you go out and you say, oh, that one's one of those that's on a private line? Is that kind of how we deal with that, or?
Yeah, and again, it's usually those that have had a leak before. Hank DeMuzio, he's well aware he has a private water line.
Yeah.
You know, because he's had issues with it. You know, like I said, the Munger Street residents, again, they're pretty familiar that they have a private water line. So it's the odd ones that come up that haven't had any issues, and like this one. And you
So-
go through a series of a few owners, and then nobody knows anymore.
So how do we distinguish, I mean, if somebody called in and said, I have a water line break, and they go out to fix it, I mean, if they haven't had a break for a while, is it like policy that, oh, let's go to our book and check if that's private or public first? Or how do we determine that? Is it because anything that's outside the central township, then we would look and see if that's a private line? Or?
Certainly if it's less than 6 inches, but there are some old 4-inch mains still in town. But boy, if you're on the rural areas, and it's a smaller line, 1 3/4 inch, 1.5 2 inch, immediately it's like, let's go check the book.
Okay.
Of course, staff has now been here for a number of years, and they pretty much know which ones are the private water lines, because we've been through that. So it rarely comes up that there's a small water line that we would think that would be ours, because by definition, you know, those small lines are private.
Mhm.
So we operate under that. If a small line has a leak on it, somebody's not aware, a new owner, hey, I've got to, you know, I say, okay, let's make sure that it's in here. So that's what we.
How do you know it's small without digging it up, though?
Well,
Curious.
usually there's no, for instance, there's no fire hydrants.
Okay.
So, and so somehow this private water line thing gets developed is that, you know, a developer or a series of homeowners don't want to put a water main size down the street, costs too much money. Can we put can we put a smaller line through it? When the decision that was made years ago is, yeah, sure, go ahead, but you're going to own it, because you're not upgrading it to have, you know, firefighting capabilities and high fire hydrants and so on and so forth. So that's how these things developed. There were some of them across country, over hill and dale. You know, it was a way to get water supply. It was too expensive to run it down the street. So sometimes they're kind of snaky on where they go, and therefore they were private, because the town didn't want to maintain them.
I just think aside from this incident, that, you know, you just said a new owner, you find out the new owner suddenly finds out they're on a private line. That's not due diligence on the town's part. I mean, I think we have an obligation. I understand that it may be work, but I wouldn't put it out publicly and have about 100 people call and say, hey, am I on a private line? I don't think you want to invite that kind of a response either. Call in and ask if you're on a private line.
Right.
If you have a form letter and you have, I don't know how many people are on the 30, out of the 30 private lines are on there, we certainly, I would think, have an obligation to let them know. I mean, it just doesn't seem right that they should be surprised by a $5,000 water bill, assuming that it might be that, when they had no idea they're on a private line. I mean, it's just, it doesn't feel right to me, that's all.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I'm not saying the solution for tonight. I think you can make arguments on both sides, perhaps, although I think Solomon's child. I mean, in fairness, try to look at some kind of compromise on an isolate and call it an incident that's a teaching, learning, let's do something about this. I mean, we're certainly doing it in other areas. We have an opportunity to going forward to maybe, once they're notified, and we can maybe make some statement in there that this is official legal notice that you are on a private line, and that going forward, any kind of incidents is your responsibility to repair. Once the person has that notice, I think that's it. But determining whether they're public or private, to your point, anything that's small you say is private, but half the homeowners in the world don't know how big their lines are. They don't know whether it's new or old.
I mean, I would leave it to the town manager to decide what's the, I think people should be informed that they have a private line. And I think that the town manager, I would leave it to the town manager to figure out what's the most efficient way to do that, and not to tell her do it one way or the other, because I think that that's really not our business. I think the issue is really to do about this situation, and
I don't particularly care about somebody out on Painter Road right now. I'm kind of concerned about the people on Munson Road. So.
Well, and also we're wasting water. I mean, there is a sense in which.
I mean, there's another factor here. All of these 4 people that I contacted, it's the fall of the year. Everybody wants everything done at once. It's just the nature of the business. So they're very, very busy. So you can say to me tonight that, Mike, you and your 3 neighbors have to get that done, and you have to pay for it. And I can go to these 4 people and say, okay, which one of you can get here the earliest? And the earliest one is 6 weeks. In the meantime, that water is leaking. It's saturating that sandy soil underneath the town road. And it's going to make matters worse here.
Dan, can the water department, I mean, where are they at as far as workload right now? Could they go and fix that? And if we deem that this is private line, bill evenly to the 4 accounts? I mean, is that an option?
If you want us to fix it, you just need to vote that you want the water department to fix it, and we'll fix it. I'm just concerned with the can of worms.
Well, I'm saying if
That's
we
all.
deem it, you'd have to bill it out.
Right. Right.
You have some leverage to a person that doesn't want to pay. You can go and turn his water off. I organized getting a contractor to go in there and fix that. He's going to want his money. I'll pay him out of my pocket, but one of my neighbors doesn't pay. I don't have any leverage. I can't shut his water off. I mean, I could, but I'd probably get shot when I went in there with a valve. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I don't know how many of these private water systems involve more than 2 houses, but it doesn't make sense to me, but particularly over the years. I mean, when Paul and Bud Palmer put the line in, it was those 2. But all the lots have been sold, all the houses are new owners 2 or 3 times over. And they don't know anything, and how you can expect for those people, and especially nowadays, to get together and agree to pay on something. I mean, it's kind of hard, you know. It's not a condo association.
If the town does go in and fix it and bills it out, you're still going to own the line with the other 4 people.
Hey, if that's what you deem, that's what you deem. But and I guess.
But that's, I mean, I just want to make sure that you would understand that that's what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. So.
Yeah, I mean, Susan, what I think what Mike and I have talked about is if the select board decides that we own it, one of the first things we're going to do is write up an agreement and record it in the land records that says this is a line that's owned by these 4 properties, and if the 4 owners agree that they're each going to pay 25% of any repairs or maintenance or whatever. I mean, we're not here to, combat the question.
Right.
I mean, we don't like the process.
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
you were understood what we were talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I agree with Colleen. pretty much on that. But I still think there's a question on who does own that land, or who does own that line. I mean, there's a question. I don't think it's as black and white as we both seem to think it is.
Well, it's-
Pretty gray.
Seems
I mean, it seems to me we're coming towards something like if the town could fix the line and then bill the property owners for the cost. I think that would, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm concerned about this is that we're spewing water into the ground, and it's a precious substance. So get it fixed as soon as possible. And I think that in those situations where the town would simply, the Department of Public Works would simply go in, fix it, and bill each property owner a portion of the cost, and it's done. Now, the other question as to who owns the line, it seems to me, is a very complicated one, and I don't think that we can really decide this tonight, and it would seem to me you need to get lawyers involved and so on and so forth. But this would seem to me to be a way of fixing the thing, and then billing the property owners who would then owe the town their portion of the cost, and then the thing would be resolved, at least as far as the leak is concerned.
So if I can cut you off there, I think I get your point. I want to move this along, and I disagree with you that you need to get lawyers involved in this. I think there's been a lot of testimony, and so I think that based upon the town policy that was written and adopted by the select board, and the lack of data to the contrary, that it probably that we need to observe that it's a private line. I think we owe, because we did a poor job of communicating, I think we owe resolving this, helping the neighbors resolve this situation, and on a one-time basis, that I think we should fix it and bill it out.
Okay.
And then I think we charge our water department to, I mean, it seems like we have a map that shows every line that we have previously deemed private, and that we notify with those bills that, as an official notification, and for them to get that, especially if there's multiple parties on that line, that they come up with some agreement. It's their responsibility to come up with agreement amongst themselves, but then we feel, then we've at least done something in the modern communication age that is documented, and they've been notified, and we don't go through this circuitous type conversation again.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't suggesting that we hire a lawyer to find out whether I mean, if they want to investigate this further, that would be their choice, not ours.
Pleasure of the
That
board.
sounds wise.
Well, in fact, what you've described is addressing the two issues I see on this thing. And so, let's see, how can we put this, are you looking, I'm thinking how I put this as a motion. Motion would be to, first of all, that the town make an effort, with guidance of the town manager, to notify all owners of private water lines of their existence, and that they will be responsible for future maintenance of these lines. And then the second item is that the town repair this problem on Munson Road, and then bill the four landowners equal proportional amount as a one-time solution.
I'd second that.
Any other comments?
Should we add with the stipulation that it is a private line? That it will remain a
Yes.
private line?
Well, yes.
Okay.
kind of get what I said, Kathleen?
Dick did. That's what I was thinking.
John probably did too.
Of course. Got it all right here.
All right, second.
So, moved and seconded, yeah. Okay. So, any other comments on it? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Not ideal, but.
Thank you for listening to it.
Thanks for bringing it forward. I mean,
Yeah.
it's big.
So how long you been doing double duty, Kathleen? Nope.
About a month and a half, right? Yeah. Couple babies done.
Yeah. Whoosh.
All right, second item, huh?
Oh, yeah.
All in favor?
Hey.
Say that was thoughtful consideration.
That was a good dialogue.
Yeah, I think it was,
Good dialogue.
Never an hour.
I think it was a
It
big
was-
effort
it was
on
a
our part.
pretty
I think
big
it was
issue, though.
worthwhile.
Yeah,
I
it
think we owe that to taxpayers and people that are part of this community, so I'm willing to get up that, going to bed really late.
All I wanted to say at the time was that there have been instances where the town has facilitated private work between landowners.
Kind of like what we just did.
Yes, not necessarily doing the work, but facilitating with the contractor, with the landowners paid, and they, so I know there's instances where town has facilitated, so that's all I was trying to say. But I was good, I was quiet.
You
were
were very
really
good.
good.
For a whole hour, I was quiet.
You make up for it.
I know, I did. Can I make up for that hour now?
Hey, you guys all gonna come forward? Come on all.
Because she has a bunch of things to ask you.
Yeah. No. I apologize for delaying you guys in the schedule.
It's not often that we get a professor providing an overview.
I know.
Tell by the organizational.
We don't receive a grade, we'll be all right.
Not sure where can that click. Oh, there we go.
Well, thank you again. We're back. And, this is the ladder committee that was formed some 2.5 years ago. Since Chief Myron Selleck and the Professor Jeff Carpenter is here to explain our final detail and our proposal for replacement of the aerial. Myron.
Okay. And I'd just like to acknowledge that the other members of our committee were Captain Kurt Gallipo and Lieutenant Scott Selleck, and we had one other member that left our department. So the four of us have forged onward, and we're here tonight with a report from the proposals. So tonight, we're going to give you an outline of the bidders, assessing the bid compliance, scoring the bids, the scores, gross bids, discounts, net bids, and our recommendation. These are all came out of, since we received the bids on the 1st of September, the committee met several times. And then we'll take any questions or comments. So the firms that were invited to bid, just to recap, were HME from Wyoming, Michigan, Pierce Manufacturing from Appleton, Wisconsin, and Smeal Fire Apparatus from Snyder, Nebraska. So the committee first assessed compliance. We collectively evaluate each of the three bids. We compared each bidder's proposal to our 82 or so item specification list. For each item, we checked compliance and listed the page number for reference. The resulting spreadsheet is part of your packet. That was a lot of hours represented in building that spreadsheet that you all have. I certainly found it very useful. It was quite an eye-opener. So, in consultation with the chief, the committee did all of the work that you saw on that spreadsheet without knowing what the pricing was from any of the bidders. We evaluated the trucks on the printed specifications, their proposals, and evaluated them as such. And at the very last night, we interjected the prices to see how that worked. And we do feel it's important to do it that way. And I feel that we've created a model for future apparatus committees that will work very well. So we use this following procedure to score the bids. We first listed all of the items, and we created a weight for each of the items on a scale of 1 to 3. The items that were deemed the most important to the apparatus received a 3. Items that were deemed less important, but still something we wanted, received a 1. And likewise.
Right, and you can see an example is what's the load rating of the ladder. That's very important. Exactly where the hangers for the headsets in the compartment, we'd like to have them, but it doesn't matter if they're here or there, right? So that got a 1. Most things got a 2.
There was a lot of 2s. Yeah, yeah. So then we went item by item, and we assessed how each manufacturer followed our specification, and we used a 0 to 3 scale. Zeros were assigned. A lot of times we just couldn't find verbiage in their proposal that they even acknowledged that we wanted a certain item. And then ones where there was some acknowledgement, they were in there, may not really have been to what we'd requested. A 2 was they met the standard. And 3s were assigned for bids that fulfilled and exceeded. And there were a few 3s.
Right. So back to the load rating, and one of the examples, one of the bids, we asked for a 500-pound load rating at the tip of the ladder. One of the ladders exceeds that. Okay, so that got a 3.
Then we multiplied those raw scores by our weighted number and across the items, and that's how we came up with an aggregate score for each of the bidders. And our final scoring is robust in various other weighing schemes.
Right, so if you don't
Sure
like
is.
0, 1, 2, you can do it another way, and you're going to probably get exactly the same results. Okay? All right.
So the results of our assessment, you'll see that we have the raw scores, and HME scored quite high with 395 points. And Smeal followed with 365, and Pierce at 345. Those were just taking the initial scores, multiplying it by the weighted number, and came up with that aggregate.
And then we did this for Victor. So imagine the HME is 100, and then deflate the other scores accordingly. So we think of HME as an A+, Smeal as an A-, and Pierce was basically a B+. Right? Maybe it's an easier way of thinking about it.
It's good. Terrific.
Okay, so here are the gross bids.
So then we put the bids in. These are the gross prices.
Got lucky.
You can see that HME proposed the lowest bid of $825,100. Smeal came in at $853 and change, and Pierce came in at $937,000 and some loose.
But on top of that, you've got to account for some of the discounts that we can get for paying cash here, so that changes the numbers a little bit.
We didn't specifically solicit discounts, but 2 of the 3 bidders offered them. HME offered a $15,334 discount. These are for 100% prepaid, which I thought was a nice offer. Pierce came up with a pretty big reduction, but even their discounted price, their net price, is still the high bidder at $888. I'm not saying that Smeal wouldn't offer a discount. I said we didn't specifically request it, and they didn't offer one.
Okay.
So we took all that information and the committee's recommendation here tonight. I think it should be pretty obvious that we're here to request that you support the HME bid, and we thank you. And we certainly will answer any questions.
Questions, Select Board?
I just like to commend them on a good job. I mean, this is, I could say.
So, awesome presentation. It's fabulous. And thank you for doing all that work. Just one, can this truck be maintained locally? Like, in order to, you know, I would hope we'd get a long service life out of this truck. Does it need to be shipped back to the company for service? Can it be serviced here? Do we have any indication of that? Or that it would be more expensive to service than a truck, one of the other trucks?
So this truck will be serviced through a local dealer. The local
Okay.
dealer's in New Hampshire,
Oh, okay. So that's not too bad.
so it's not so far. Not
Okay.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, no. And they do have, you know, they do have some road service
Yes.
for certain items.
Okay,
If
so
we
they'll
have-
come to
Our normal routine stuff, I think probably, you know,
DPW.
DPW will handle,
Yeah.
you know, oil changes and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah, I meant more like,
Critical service work would be
Yeah.
done either at their facility
something that's
or
specific for this truck. I mean, I
Yeah.
assume somebody local could change the oil in it, but,
one would think.
oh, yeah. Well, maybe not in this day and age, maybe not.
You know, furthermore, we didn't really explain that between the manufacturers and us, the buyer, all of these are purchased through a dealership. And the HME dealership is Lakes Region Fire Apparatus in West Ossipee, New Hampshire.
Okay,
Smeal is represented by New England Fire Equipment in North Haven, Connecticut. And Pierce is represented through Minuteman Fire Rescue in Walpole, Mass.
okay,
So none of them are Burlington or Rutland.
right.
But of the three, I believe probably
it's not-
geographically,
it's not
probably Lakes
Wisconsin
Region is the
either,
closest.
right?
No, not Wisconsin, thank goodness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nick, you had a comment?
Well, you know, I've been watching this process now, and it's been a long one, obviously, that goes without saying, you know, from the point of which we questioned whether we needed the vehicle, and you've done a good job of quantifying that, and then whether, in fact, we could rebuild that which we had, and we went through the process, and it did a good job of that one, to the point where we realized we need a new vehicle. I'm watching, and I've seen this process play out with some of the groups I work for nationwide, and this is really an outstanding methodology you've come up with for evaluating it. It's, I appreciate the fact that you didn't put the price up. I think that gave them a chance to really look objectively at this and say, which is the best vehicle? And the way you graded this, and then putting that criticality coefficient in there, if you will, that was really quite good. When I first saw, I stopped by the fire station Thursday, I guess it was, because I wanted to see what the process was before this meeting. And as I looked at the scoring, I said, okay, well, the one that has the highest number must be Pierce. The fact that it was in reverse was, I think like all of us, was very interesting and threw me off. So this has been good. I think we have a good product. I'd like to see you use this methodology, as you mentioned, Myron, to continue on for other vehicles. But when the time comes here, when we're done with our discussion, I would have no problem making a motion.
I'll start with the motion, and we can,
I can start with the motion.
Please.
And do you want to do both
Or
at
did
once?
you wanna,
one at a time.
One
or
at a
did you
time.
wanna ask a question?
She can,
I'll wait.
let's get the motion on the floor.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the ladder truck committee's recommendation toward the contract for the purchase of the new ladder truck to HME of Wyoming, Michigan, for a total cost of $809,766, which does take into account the discount of $15,334 for 100% prepayment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Laura?
I would have echoed the same thing, asked the same question that Heather did about repair, which you responded to already, and I also found it curious, you know, that it worked out the way that it did, and your methodology was really super. I'm thinking about our town meeting narrative, you know, like when we go and we look at our equipment fund at that time and what your thought is about what we would say at that point. You know, knowing that we're spending a big chunk of our equipment fund on this piece of apparatus.
Chief, you have that?
Certainly, we can address that. I mean, we've just pushed out the next 3 purchases of equipment, and the fund will handle those purchases without a doubt. So it's was something that was well done. and
Okay, I'm
really
pretty
proud
sure,
of it.
yeah, I just
Yep.
wanted to,
Yep.
reiterate that again. I know that John did a good job of covering the story already. I'm trying to remember if we highlighted that in the
We're
in the
still
story.
working on that, replacement schedule, because
Mm-hmm.
we have some that are really, really close, and we wanted to, and then we put that 25-year figure in there, so it's kind of moving things around. So we haven't got it ready to come back to you, but we'll come back to you with that spreadsheet, or at least give it to the manager for your packet. That'll have the estimated cost and the date of the replacement and the fund total at that time. So you'll be able to see that the fund will still be able to handle the recent purchase or the upcoming purchases.
Yeah, that's a good point. If we update Jeff's spreadsheet that we had looked at before,
Give it to you.
before we show this to the voters at town meeting day, probably give them a level of comfort that we continue to fund our equipment fund appropriately.
Really noted.
Okay, that's it.
So, any other comments?
Thank you.
All in favor of Nick's motion to approve $809,766 for purchase of HME ladder truck, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Yay.
Thank you.
And wait a second,
Wait.
number 2.
Oh, now we have to actually go along
Have
and
to
say, okay,
authorize.
we spend the money. So this motion is to authorize our town treasurer, Jackie Sullivan, to release a lump sum payment to HME Incorporated for $809,000, or $809,766.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Comments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Whoever she writes down.
Fine, I don't care.
Brian, one other thing while we're still here, so you were also presented in your package the proposed budget, and it had a loose equipment and radio equipment items that are in there that were inclusive with this final purchase price of $866,471. As we've done in the past, we've tried to take advantage of sale prices, season-ending prices to outfit the equipment. With Engine 3, what we did is we established a fund and an account number through the treasurer's office, and we purchased these items over the year that the truck was being built, so we could take advantage of any sales or anything like that to outfit the truck. So when it came in, all the stuff was here and available. And with this truck, there's a mounting allowance figured into the price, so we would send that stuff that needs to be mounted right over to West Ossipee, and they would mount that for us.
Okay.
So those figures were $48,305 for the equipment and $8,400 for the radio equipment, for a total of $56,705. That would cover the outfitting of this piece of equipment. Some of the equipment on the current truck dates back to Seagraves, and some of the hand tools no longer meet OSHA requirements. So this would bring this truck, that is state-of-the-art, would put state-of-the-art equipment on as well. That would allow it to live with the truck.
So what is the timing on that, David? Are you asking for an approval for those expenses now?
Yes, for now, yes.
That was going to be my question. Would you like us, do you need us to act on that now? Are you already, have you already got your Cabela's catalog out looking at New Year and stuff?
We've got that catalog marked, circled, worn out, whatever, but yes, those purchases could be made, but we're going to hold off and purchase them when sale prices come up, but they'll all be purchased by the time the truck will be here. But yes, we would ask to have the monies allotted now.
Is this something that, that your committee wants to, either of your committees wanted to review, or have you already looked at the?
The money's
You're okay
already
with
out.
that?
The
We
money's
talked about
already
the
there.
truck, But I never talked to you about the other
It would
equipment.
all come out of the same fund.
I was gonna say, I think I
we could
remember those
authorize.
amounts, and if it's all there, then that's okay, unless Kathleen has anything.
That's it.
Okay. Yes, I do. I think it's fine.
It's fine,
Yeah, I think
okay.
it's fine for our
Nick, did you
committee.
take good enough notes you can make the motion,
I've
please?
almost taken good enough notes.
And it is
but-
in your
But after
packet.
I asked Dave this one, it is in the packet?
Yep.
This one?
I did, yeah.
Said you need a paper?
What's?
It was in there.
Yeah, no.
Document is in
So
there.
refresh me, Dave, just so I got it right.
Yes.
So this is to establish an equipment fund with Jackie Sullivan?
Yes.
For purchase of, okay, then,
Exactly.
okay, so then, having that knowledge, I'm going to make a motion to establish an equipment purchase fund for this truck under the guidance of Town Treasurer Jackie Sullivan for the sum of, well, it's for $48,305 for equipment and tools, and for $8,400 for radio equipment, for a total sum of $56,705.
Second?
Sorry.
You.
I was trying to. Everyone just lost it, sorry.
I was feeling a little lonely there for a
Brian's
second.
like, work with me, work with me.
Somebody give me a second.
He was jerking the last one, so.
I said, you guys go to
Okay.
270.
All right, any
I don't
questions?
know who she's got down for.
We're all punching.
Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, all in favor of
think it was 10
approving the
o'clock
fund for the purchase of the noted items that you already have a list for, and you may actually be able to get them cheaper?
Oh, yeah, that's our plan.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. All in favor of approving this at this time, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Thank you very much for all the work on that, Myron, Jeff, and your crew. That was,
Nice job.
Great job.
and it ended up being, I
Great
think,
job.
quite a bit less than what our worst-case scenario that we had feared, so.
Yeah.
No, it's not often that the correlation between price and quality is negative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spending a lot of money too.
Okay. Transportation Alternatives Grant Program discussion.
So I had included in your packet a tentative proposal for the Transportation Alternatives Grant Fund. I just wanted to give you some additional information based on some questions I received. Just a review of where we are right now with the funding. So we have one grant for Elm Street to Champlain Valley Heating and Plumbing for a sidewalk. That grant is for $330,000. The town's 10% share is $33,000, which we appropriated over 2 fiscal years in the capital fund. So we're covered for that share of the grant. The second grant was for $378,000, with the town's 10% share being $37,800. We still need to appropriate that funding in the capital fund, and I would propose doing that over 2 fiscal years in FY18 and FY19. Then I had outlined to you a proposal for submitting a grant application for the difference between the cost of a sidewalk and a shared use path going from Champlain Valley Heating and Plumbing to Catamount Park, and a rough estimate of $100,000. And so that the Transportation Alternatives Grant that we would be applying for that is a 20% share. So that would be $20,000. That would be the town's share. And then we also talked this summer about applying for the remainder of the path from Catamount Park to Route 7, and that would be about $990,000, again, according to rough estimates. 10% of that would be $99,000 or so, and then 20% would be $198,000. And this grant program is 20%, but also to note that the maximum grant underneath the Transportation Alternatives Program is for a total project of $375,000 with a $300,000 state share and a $75,000 local match. So I just wanted to set that out. That would be the town's responsibility if we went forward with that grant application. It would be a small, roughly a third of what the full cost of going from Catamount Park to Route 7 we'd be eligible for funding for. That said, the engineer is still working on the better estimates of both the difference between the sidewalk and the shared use path and the remainder of a shared use path from Catamount to Route 7. So I'd like to come back to you on October 11th with the better estimates of the cost of the project, and provide you this information in writing about where we would stand with the match for your consideration.
Trying to add it all up in my head.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So Heather and I
So as
had a reality check.
for the two grants that we would be, the two applications we would be submitting, you're looking about $220,000 as the town match for the whole portion from Catamount Park to Route 7. But keep in mind that under this program, the maximum project cost is $375,000, so it would be a $75,000 cash match. So you'd be looking at $105,000 for a portion.
On top of that. So,
Yeah, I guess if we can get it all lined out, and we'll take another look at it. Is that what your thoughts are?
And I'll get
on
a
this,
better
Kathleen?
indication of how far we could go with $375,000, if that was something.
Okay.
yeah, because we have the 33, we still have to allocate the 37,800, then the $20,000, plus the 198 from this, plus the 1/3 cost on top of that. So that's a lot of money.
Starting to get to be a big project.
Yeah.
Like 500,000 or so.
Which is, I mean, in,
More.
you
Yeah, a
know,
little bit more
that,
than that.
Because if you add
Six,
in what
yeah.
we've
Yeah.
already committed to.
Oh, right, I
yeah.
didn't do that.
to come out of capital improvements, there's,
Just to give you an idea, our capital improvement budget for the highway department for this fiscal year was $626,000.
Yeah.
so,
And even with a $198,000 match, if we could, we're talking about a third of our capital budget right now.
mhm.
So I didn't know what Kathleen was gonna present, but I support the project, but I can't support this amount of money right now, given what we have to do and the other things we're considering.
So let's look at what you have when you bring it back, but we just
I
wanted.
won't be here next time,
Oh,
so.
that's right. We're just trying to get the reality check out there for everybody to have that discussion.
This is what I was talking about when we had the last thing, because I knew the reality check was coming.
Right.
But I do have some thoughts on ways that we can help make this doable if this is what we really
Right.
want to go. And that's, we can talk about that next week, next
Right. Well,
meeting.
time to bring them to the table, I think, so,
Right.
yeah.
Donna?
Yeah, no, if there's any possible way to share the figures like a week before that meeting, and if you can share ideas for other ways we could try to look for that money. I just think Exchange Street at this point is so important, and particularly in view of all the other things we're talking about. You know, if there are other ways we can do this, it would be,
That was exactly my point. I didn't want to rush to
Right.
bring it to you tonight without giving you the opportunity to take a look at all the
Yeah.
whole history and what the engineer's estimates are.
thank you, that's great.
I see Laura, she's thinking, oh my God, the bicycle path's gotta go.
It's not what we're saying.
We're trying to get
No.
there. We're gonna get there.
No, I see that we all agree on the value of the project, and we're just trying to figure out the best way to finance this project and to understand what it will cost. So that's where we're at. So it's good, we're going to get there. It's just that, like a lot of these kinds of projects, it takes time. So in the meantime, if there's anything that we can do to garner the support that's needed in terms of letters of support too for grant writing, we want to be there for that. And
I think we've got letters, lots of letters. We need to figure
money.
out, we need money. Heather's
Money.
making the universal
Money.
money
at
symbol.
what point does the town consider another way to finance it, so it's not a capital,
Kind of bonding or
a bond,
Right,
a bond
You could
project?
bond for it.
we could bond for it. We're also looking, at
And then what would the process be?
Lots
It
of
is it
other-
is serving a particular segment of the community.
Right.
Maybe that we can get that segment more involved in this. And there is an interest, and there is a desire by a lot of the Exchange Street community, especially just the safety aspect down
Yeah.
there. It's crazy, so.
Well, wouldn't you argue that the Cross Street Bridge was for a particular segment and that this is also?
Say the Cross Street Bridge was for all of Middlebury.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I
don't
think,
know if you
it's-
could make the Cross Street Bridge one small segment, no.
I think
But
Laura's,
let's,
she's making a
let's
good point,
defer
but
this. Yeah,
we'll-
let's, we can all give some thought to it, but
yeah.
I think we need to see what the dollar figure is, and then,
And why don't I calculate out the bond payments
bond payment
over a
would be-
20-year period,
yeah.
just as part of the piece of the
I
puzzle?
think that's good, because I think if we're gonna talk about raising money, that it might be raising money to do a bond
pay a
payment.
bond.
Right,
That's actually the way I was thinking.
that's what
Yeah.
I was thinking.
okay.
Can I just ask a quick question? Because I won't be here at the next meeting, so I won't be a part of the conversation. And I wondered if we had a policy for a point at which we have to ask for voter approval? Like, do we ever reach a threshold of money that we commit to, that we had, do you know what I mean? Like we commit $10,000.
So that's what the capital budget
Yeah.
is for.
Oh, okay.
They approve our budget.
Right,
If
so-
you want to finance it, the voters have to approve
Right.
that.
Right.
And if I just want to caution, if we're going to a bond situation, would like the infrastructure committee to have an opportunity, because we have many other things that need to be addressed, that people have been asking us to address for 2 years that we have not done. And because this would be an effort for a very specific segment,
I see your
I
point.
feel like we're ignoring some other people who have asked us to do things that we haven't yet done, so,
Yeah, and it would depend upon how we pay for the bond.
yes.
Yep.
That's why
So thank you for,
I
because I
think
won't
we've
be
got some
here.
more work to do here. Okay, Jim?
Okay, so I'm here tonight with an update on our bridge and rail project. Good news, we are making progress. The project team will be ready to present its revised plan and timeline to the Select Board at the October 11th meeting. Just as a reminder, the overall lead for the project team is V-Trans's Wayne Simmons, who is the head of the Accelerated Bridge Construction Program at V-Trans. I think you've all had a chance to meet him. And there are new project leads at VHB, the engineering firm, and Kubricki as well. So this is a new team. They're an energized team. They're a very focused team. They will be here in 2 weeks to present the results of their work at that meeting. They've spent the past 6 weeks looking at the risks associated with the project and re-examining the schedule. I've been asked, as I've told you before, to be a part of the project team that meets every Wednesday. And so I'm in Montpelier for several hours each Wednesday to represent the town's interests and kind of report back our progress on the schedule. The project team has two guiding goals here. One is safety, and that's ensuring the continuing safety of the Merchants Row and Main Street bridges. And the second is to limit the street level disruption downtown to one construction season or less. That was the town's mandate to the project team. They've taken that as their mantra. That and safety are the two primary concerns. What's emerged from the discussion, and they'll share this with you, is the plan to reduce the time in which the two bridges are being replaced from a period of many months to a period of several weeks. Not surprising, given that Wayne is the champion of the Accelerated Bridge Construction Program. And so a lot of the work that's gone into the past several weeks is looking at how does that get done. And they will share that with you when they're here. Before presenting the plan to the full Select Board, the team needed feedback on several key aspects of the plan that they've been looking at and the timeline, so they requested a meeting with Brian. That took place last week, and Nick and Donna, as representatives of the local project management team, attended that meeting as well. I think it was a very candid, productive discussion, and it helped the team kind of finalize some of their ideas and get ready to present to the full select board here. Some of the key issues that were discussed at that meeting that you'll hear about in 2 weeks were relocation of utilities in the project area. That's an area that had not been looked at closely previously, and so that's gotten a lot of scrutiny. The closure of Printers Alley during certain times of the construction for public safety and access to the construction site. The conservation measures that will have to be in place to protect the 3 endangered or threatened species of bats that have been observed roosting underneath Merchants Row and Main Street bridges. The plan to contain or manage a hazardous waste spill in the rail tunnel itself. So these are all issues of a very complex project that they've been addressing and looking at very closely over the past several weeks, and they will be here to talk with you about their resolution, their plan for moving forward. I mentioned bridge safety up front, and again, that's number one in terms of concerns on the part of the project team, certainly on the part of the town. At the town's request, V-Trans will be moving from an annual inspection cycle to a quarterly inspection cycle. They'll talk about how that's going to happen. And they have also Wayne has given the order for V-Trans operations to stockpile 2 temporary bridges so that if the worst came to happen, which is that one or both of the bridges were declared unsafe, within 7 days, a double-lane temporary bridge would be in place downtown. Again, they'll talk more about that, but I wanted to mention that because the safety of the bridges has been, I think, paramount in most folks' minds. So they'll be presenting to the select board, and in parallel with that, the V-Trans and the project team here will be meeting with key stakeholders and property owners, particularly in the project area here. One-on-one meetings, over the next 3 or 4 weeks here. I think it's critical that that the folks who are most directly affected have an opportunity to meet directly with the project team, to air any concerns, to hear what the plan is, to understand what the plan is, and to offer their perspective on the plan. That's a level of planning and a level of engagement that's, I think, essential to the success of the project. So that'll be happening too. That process will culminate around November 1st with a public meeting that V-Trans will organize, likely be held here, it will be held here in Middlebury, perhaps here at the town hall. That's to be decided. But I think that public meeting will follow presentation to the select board and all the conversations with the stakeholders and property owners, and that'll be that public meeting. So that's the timeline that's in place right now. Presentation to the select board in 2 weeks. In parallel with that presentation, discussion with the key stakeholders and property owners in town, public meeting around the 1st of November, and we'll have effectively kind of come to the end of this phase of the reset of the project. Any questions about that? I want to talk about the contractual side of things for a minute, but are there any questions about kind of where we are and what the schedule looks like over the next few weeks?
So in 2 weeks, they will tell us what their plan is for when construction would happen?
Yes. They'll talk about what the construction plan is, what the timeline looks like, what the risks are associated with that timeline, what's on the critical path. They'll give a full overview.
Nick?
Right, just one point, and you heard Jim say that it's moved from what we're hearing is a project that's going to be over a very long window as far as disruption of the bridges and the traffic movement through town to a much shorter period. But to keep in mind, there's still a lot of additional work to be done, so there will be construction for a longer period of time as we do a lot of the subsurface, the sub-street level work. So it won't be just a few month type of project. It will still be a long project. It's just that the disruptive period for the traffic flow and the movement of pedestrians in the town center will be dramatically reduced.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, the trade-off here is a longer lead time to get to the point where the bridges can be replaced, and so they'll talk about that. A lot of prep work that has to be done in advance, and before the bridges could be tackled in this kind of reduced timeline. Okay, any other questions? Contracts. The town, following the August 9th Select Board meeting, terminated its engineering services agreement with VHB on a 15-day for convenience, and that agreement terminated on August 26th. And VHB is now working on retainer with V-Trans, and that'll eventually become a contract. The other agreement that the town held for services was with Kubricki for construction services. Both Benj Putnam and I have seen a draft of an agreement that would reassign the town's agreement with Kubricki to V-Trans. V-Trans is working through a few other adjustments to that agreement, and so that should be ready to go soon too. So the town's agreements with or any remaining liability with both VHB and Kubricki should be taken care of shortly. And then that leaves the key agreement between the town and V-Trans, and that finance and maintenance agreement, as it's called, and that is now out for a third-party legal review. And we'll get an update on that shortly.
I did check on that before this afternoon, and they're hoping to have it back this week. So
Okay.
they're going to prod the attorney. So
Yeah, great. It's great to have an independent third-party review of the agreement that's going to determine the future relationship on this project between V-Trans and the town. And so when that's in place, and we get the comments back and have a chance to review those and discuss them with V-Trans, we'll come back to the Select Board at the right time for review and eventual signing of the agreement.
one thing did come out of our meeting the other day is, and we'll see more about it on the 11th, but you know, the one, probably the largest concern I had is continued flow of traffic through downtown Middlebury. In the event that one of the bridges, one or both of the bridges is condemned, there is a commitment by V-Trans to have temporary bridging assets set aside, and you know, there would be a lag time. They estimated maybe a week to drop one of those bridges and put a temporary bridge in its place. But I'm looking for a written commitment from, I asked for a written commitment from Secretary to us making that commitment to the town as part of this ongoing plan. So at sometime fairly soon, we'll need to discuss and have a position as a select board. And you know, we haven't gotten enough data, but I think the 11th will be our first exposure as a board. They're going to come and lay it out and give us an opportunity to ask questions and whatnot. And during that same time, as Jim said, we're going to meet with the key stakeholders and see what some of the other issues, make sure everything's being addressed. Within, maybe by the next meeting, we'll have, I would like to look at that as maybe our target, that we would have earnest discussion and take a position as a select board on this project. So I don't want to get the cart before the horse and ask, you know, by the 11th is your first exposure to this. There are some significant changes in the plan, and to allow you to have time to think about it, ask questions, and then come back to it again later. But before too long, we need to have an official position of the town. So by then, we'll have new contracts. Everything should be in place, and I think it would be fair at that point to ask for people to weigh in what they feel about it.
Okay. I want to stress too that at the October 11th meeting, this is not going to be an elaborate PowerPoint presentation. You know, this is going to be a discussion. You'll have the key people here. They're going to lay out the plan for you. There'll be some visuals so that, it's understood what's going to happen when. As with last week's meeting, I think it will just be a good, candid discussion, an opportunity for you to ask, a wide range of questions and to really dig into the plan.
I guess the last thing I ought to share with you is we'll probably, if the board is supportive of it when we make our final decision, but my recommendation is that we downsize our project management team to just a couple select board members and Jim as the point people to keep the town informed and to keep the select board informed, and that our need for a larger working group is not there, given that the project management responsibility is going back to the state.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Should we anticipate a lot of attendance at that meeting, the October meeting, even though you said it's not a PowerPoint, but I think so many people are chomping at the bit for information that I think we should be prepared for a lot of attendance.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to talk about where we hold the meeting. I mean, we can fit some here. I don't know how many. The intent is that it would be the exposure to the select board, and that we would be ready to do a public meeting at a later time.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 36 chairs in here normally. We could get some more chairs in and fill in quite a bit. I think 80 between this room and that room, which was envisioned for larger meetings.
Okay.
Well, I think the other aspect, Laura, for me would be that one of the things that the public might want to consider is that they're going to hear the information that night. You may want to stop and think about that information and bring all your questions or anything else back to the public meeting. It's very hard, I think, to hear something for the first time and come up with a firm conclusion. At least for me, I want to digest the information, take it back home and think about it. So I think just as letting the public know that they're going to have the opportunity, having that public meeting set with a date at the October 11th meeting, we should be able to have that announcement made, I would think, for the date of the public meeting, so that, certainly people are more than welcome to attend it, but I think that what you want is a public meeting where you actually fully vet it versus at the select board meeting of the 11th.
I'm just anticipating that you're going to have a lot that want to have that
Yeah, I
information
know.
as soon as possible, and that if you could announce the public meeting date as soon as possible, that might alleviate that.
Yeah, and I think that's a very wise idea.
Jim can work towards having that date set.
Yeah.
By the 11th, if we could know when we're going to have a public meeting date, and so that it would also help me as a moderator to try to keep the conversation educating the select board and not turn into a public debate prematurely.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the other point to make, Laura, is that the key stakeholders and property owners, those who will probably be most interested, will know before we ever get to the October 11th meeting that they have one-on-ones scheduled with the project team, and so they may reserve their questions for those one-on-one meetings. I think that's important to do so that we give those folks the special consideration they deserve.
Okay.
So, but let me talk to the V-Trans folks tomorrow when I'm in Montpelier and see if we can't get a date, at least a tentative date to come back with here, and so we'll have that in advance of the October 11th meeting. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Anything else?
That's good. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Eli, I apologize. I think you wanted to make a comment on the Exchange Street project.
Yes, if I could. Should I come up?
Please, yes.
My name's Eli Madden. I'm a resident of Middlebury again. I've lived in Middlebury most of my life, but recently was living in the Brandon area because I wasn't able to find affordable housing here. And so I apologize if I missed previous times to comment on the Exchange Street project. Just wanted to mention how much it's needed. I, cycle all over the place. I've logged over 1,000 miles this year. And I think that Exchange Street and Route 7 North leading out of town are probably the worst sections of road for a cyclist in the Middlebury area. Route 7 heading north out of town is great. It has a great, it's a very wide shoulder. And, so it's great to be able to connect to that, but unfortunately we have to go through those bottlenecks. And so I'd like to share 2 experiences that I've had on those roads. The first was about 9 years ago. I was coming south on Route 7, coming off of Chipman Hill, and where Route 7 passes the north end of High Street, there's a real bottleneck there with basically no shoulder on the west side of the road. There's actually a drop-off. And I was coming downhill, so I was going fairly fast, probably 25 or 30 miles an hour, and it's a 35 zone in there, so I was just about keeping up with traffic. And there was a car a little ways behind me, and there were some cars coming up, coming the other direction. And the car behind me decided, because the road is getting narrower, he decided to accelerate. Instead of putting on the brakes, he decided to accelerate past me before these other cars came. And I mean, if I had put my hand out, I could have touched his car. And so I kept my eye on him. And he went to the high school, and I called the police about it. And this time I actually did have an officer respond. Usually they're not very responsive to complaints from cyclists. And I believe it was Officer Merkel came out and talked to me about what had happened, and he went over and actually gave the guy a ticket. However, he didn't take my statement at the time. He said that I needed to go to the station the next day to make a statement. And when I went to the station the next day, I was told by the dispatcher, Bonnie Murray, that they didn't have time for that type of thing and that I couldn't make a statement about it. The other experience, I mean, I've had many, but another good example was just the other day. I think it was a Sunday afternoon, so traffic was fairly light. And Exchange Street, the shoulder is very crumbly in a lot of the areas. It's in very bad shape. And even if there was a shoulder, it would be a lot better for cyclists. And so my daughter wanted to go to Whirly's World, go play at Whirly's World. It was a Sunday, usually pretty light traffic, so let's take the bike. She loves riding on the back of my bike. I have a seat on the back, and she loves it. And so we were going up, up Exchange Street, and just before we reached the brewery, there was a large truck coming up behind us, and he had been, keeping his distance, which was pretty good, and there was oncoming cars. But as soon as the oncoming cars were clear, we're maybe 100 yards from the brewery. He came roaring up next to us. He's obviously displeased that he'd had to wait for an extra minute. Roaring up next to us, and then put on his Jake brake to make the turn into the brewery. It was very, very loud and startling. So, anyways, I just wanted to share what it's like on the ground for a cyclist in this area. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli.
Hey, Brian, I don't know, I know for next Jamie's here, and I think Brian's here. They're both here for the same discussion about the Middlebury Business Development update.
Okay.
Maybe we could skip to that and then let them go home.
Absolutely.
Not that you don't want to stay for the rest of the meeting. But, yeah?
Were they?
They're under
committee reports.
So they're 10F.
10.
So did you have a report for us?
I do have a report. I have 2. One about the task force meeting that we just had, and then one about the regularly scheduled MBDF.
Oh, B, you're right. Okay.
And if Brian's going to share the microphone with me, we can do that now.
One about the task force meeting? How about the review?
Yeah.
Brian is here about the MBDF meeting of September 15th. You wanted to hear more about
about the Fairpoint Communications.
Yeah, that's what. So there's two.
Why don't you come forward and let's jump into whatever it is that you want to talk about.
We have one ordinary head of hair, I think.
Yes, right.
So we had our regularly scheduled Middlebury Business Development Fund Advisory Board meeting on the 15th, and I think sort of continuing a theme here this evening, if there's a theme, a lot of the conversations so far tonight have been about access to infrastructure, and what we were talking about specifically was improving telecommunications infrastructure, broadband infrastructure for the greater Middlebury community. And I think, as most of you know, roughly toward the end of last year, the beginning of 2016, we changed the format of the MBDF Advisory Board meetings, and we started hosting companies here specifically. And on the 15th, we had representatives from Fairpoint Communications. We had the state president, state of Vermont president of Fairpoint. Her name is Beth Festiggi. We had the director of government relations, a gentleman named Jeff Austin, and we had Fairpoint's, and both of those people are based here in Vermont. But we also had, via the phone, we had a gentleman by the name of French Scott, who's the director of business development. His office is down in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they came and did a presentation around their facilities, their network, their fiber that they have in and around Middlebury, their plans to expand their network and offer additional services. And it was, quite honestly, it was refreshing, because the incumbent providers usually are not very forthcoming with information or conversations or willing to engage. I know when we started this over a year ago, this conversation around improving broadband, Brian made a point of making sure that we were going to work with some of the existing providers in and around Vermont. So to have Fairpoint come as the incumbent, as the local provider here, and to have them express a willingness to work with the town, right? They wanted to sit down and engage us in a conversation specifically around a high-speed product that they offer in other parts of their territory. They inherited something called FiOS, which is a fiber to the home telecommunications service from Verizon. And they operate that FiOS network, a portion of their network, in southern New Hampshire. And they, surprisingly, were very willing to talk about deploying that same technology here. That would be a dramatic upgrade, given where we are sort of as a rural community in central Vermont. So from that perspective, I thought it was a very positive sort of first step. We are also, this Friday, I'm hosting a meeting with some high-level representatives from OTT Communications, another company that has local facilities here in Madison County. So without going into the weeds or confusing things, I shared some of this information with Brian. Brian and I just met each other this evening, but we have had an email correspondence back and forth recently, and if you have anything to add, feel free.
Well, I can't add anything to the development fund, since I'm not part of that. I can possibly explain why I'm here very, very quickly. I know it's late. I am from the town of Ripton. I live on the Ripton-Lincoln border. I run a small business there devoted to the future of education and technology. My business has been about 3.5 years old now. Been very successful with international clients, and we have now hit a wall because we cannot get sufficient broadband. We have a home office out of which we do tons and tons of work, but the greatest speed that we can possibly buy from Fairpoint, when Fairpoint actually provides it, which isn't always, is paltry. It's below what the FCC says that we can do. About 3 years ago, if given that speed, I could do basic communication with clients and with fellow research partners and people around the world. Right now, that speed is reprehensible. For example, Skype is a pretty standard conferencing tool people use around the world, especially in the developing world. I can't use video on it. I can only use audio. Video breaks up. So during a call, if I say, excuse me, I have to turn off my camera, that used to be kind of quaint or folksy, and now that just looks embarrassing. I, every week, run a video conference project that involves 700 plus people from around the world. Lots of very, very interesting thinkers and designers. I can't even begin to plan it for my house. I have to come down here to Middlebury and either use the Illesley Library office and then basically swap their broadband, or sometimes borrow parts of the college, and even then, that may or may not work. This is not considered a charming thing about Vermont. When I mention this to people, they consider this to be simply a disadvantage. I am getting into podcasting. I can't upload podcasts from home. Everything I've described is not leading edge. Everything I've described is part of the business environment, the nonprofit environment on Earth in 2016. I can't do it from Ripton. So for the past 2 months, I and dozens of others have been researching ways of improving connectivity in Ripton. And I'm saying Ripton, this is something that applies throughout the state. This is a major, major issue. We're not unique. Rural broadband is a nationwide problem. The digital divide is driven largely by rural versus urban. It's a much bigger divide than by race, class, gender, or anything else. We have spoken to elected officials, we've spoken to state departments, we've spoken to every single nonprofit and provider within the state, from Comcast AT&T to Verizon to EC Fiber to VTEL, and our conclusion is that this is a case of market failure and policy failure. There is no good market case to be made to expand broadband aggressively throughout Vermont. Over and over again, I hear from these providers that it is simply not cost effective. I've even gotten dollar estimates and colorful descriptions of just what a waste of money it would be to expand into a place like Ripton. It is also a case of policy failure because the state seems to have backed off on its drive to expand broadband. We had a major, major push, and that has stalled out. The state response right now is basically they can't do anything to help. They can't regulate Fairpoint directly, for example. They don't have funding to do anything else, and there's a perception that there's no interest in this. Everything I've described was true 2 years ago. We seem to be entering into a stasis mode where people expect this right now. I can tell you story after story people I've interviewed about this. So I have started reaching out to people to see where we should go next, what we should do, who we should work with, and who we should contact. Reached out to both gubernatorial candidates multiple times. I have yet to hear from the Minter campaign. The Scott campaign gave me a very precise, extremely small policy suggestion, which may or may not be implemented and which will have no impact. So I'm here to learn more about what is happening in the Middlebury area to see if it might then spill over to the parts of the Middlebury area that aren't being served, as well as to surrounding towns, including my own. It adds nothing to what you were describing, but
it is important context, right? It is.
I promise to speak English the entire time.
And Brian is on the MCTV board with me and is probably has been watching this and following it more closely than anyone else that I have known, and has probably spoken to more people about it than anyone else I know. And I mean, one of the questions I had was, is there any follow-up from Tilson and that work that was done that would be at all helpful moving forward?
So absolutely. So it's actually the work that Tilson did that prodded Fairpoint to engage with the town of Middlebury, and it's the work that Tilson did to prod OTT Communications to engaging with the town on Friday. We are still engaged with Tilson. They participated in this meeting, and I have a running conversation with Mr. Campbell, who used to, if you remember, he also used to be the executive director of the BTA in Montpelier. So yes, that plan is what we're looking to implement, and we're engaging each one of these providers to measure their level of interest around a specific part of the plan or a plan that's very similar to the one that Tilson and the town developed.
Okay.
So that is very much alive.
So by we, you mean the development fund?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I have shared that with you, but I'm happy to.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, I think it's interesting what you said about broadband access dividing us more than other issues, and that may bump it up as a priority, for that. Well, we do know it is a priority, but it is interesting to hear you say that. Yeah, because
It's very much about social inclusion, right? Not only economic inclusion, but you can break it out.
It's an extremely fierce exclusion, and it's one that's going to deepen unless we do something about it in Addison County as well as in Vermont as well as the nation. You can look at other examples of people treating this differently. If you look at the Chinese government, for example, the rural-urban divide in China is much steeper than it is in the United States. It's actually a social problem of great proportions. So Beijing has decided that this is a bad thing and is pouring money into the most rural provinces possible to get them online with high-speed broadband, provided that these villages and towns start online businesses. And it's worked like a charm, because the villages see this as a way of improving their standard of living. They get online, they make businesses selling whatever, providing services, and then within a short period of time, the Chinese government makes its money back, and the whole economy roars ahead. I contrast that with Vermont's GDP, which seems to be, well, not entering a hospice level, but definitely flatlining. Right? And one of the problems is that it's very, very hard to spark rural growth. Every town I talk to, every single town has the possibility of economic growth using
this.
And this is, I don't want me to just focus on economics. My field is education. I mean, it's a no-brainer to talk about what's available through education. I don't know if you guys follow the Common Core rollout. One of the biggest obstacles to the Common Core rollout has been that K through 12 schools can't guarantee bandwidth for the students to take the tests. Those tests aren't Netflix. They're pretty thin in information in little bits. And that's been blocking it because we can't provide it for everybody.
Yeah. And they have to take them online.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
That's, I mean, this is a, so I guess it's kind of implicit in my words that I think this is obviously an issue that you guys should be paying attention to and you should be celebrating and trying to push forward to.
So I say often, it's not a technology issue, right?
No.
It's the technology exists. It's a business issue. It's a different business model and a different business case for rural America, but specifically for a place like Middlebury. So
where are we in the conversation with Fairpoint?
So their representatives here 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago or so, that was the first time that the director of business development for the entire company and the president of the state of Vermont came to Middlebury to talk about broadband, right? Their interest is in a business, from a business perspective. They want to maximize their return like any business. And they're going to put capital to work in places where they can more strongly expect a return more quickly. But I was encouraged. It's the first time an incumbent provider in the years that I've been working on broadband-related issues, it's the first time, before I came to Vermont, it's the first time that an incumbent provider has volunteered to sit down and sort of brainstorm solutions. That's very uncommon. So I'm buoyed by that. I think that's a good sign. We're going to circle back with them around what a FiOS-like solution could look like here in Middlebury. And then the plan has always been, and for the last year and a half or so, to sort of do it in fiber hoods, to do it neighborhood by neighborhood, right? And the real advantage is you don't put capital to work until you can define an expected return. So doing it in a staged manner across what is, in effect, the ACSU, or what is still the ACSU. The reason I think it's important to include the ACSU is there are economies of scale when it comes to telecommunication networks. And that is our community, given, you know, from a practical perspective, yes, it's larger than Middlebury, but all those students eventually go to school in Middlebury, and Middlebury is connected to so many households across the ACSU. I think it's an ACSU solution. That's a lot about broadband. But,
well, I think it's important. I mean, I think Addison County is a rural county, and you know, if we're going to compare ourselves to Chittenden County, we shouldn't, because our strength is the fact that we're rural, and that's where a lot of the young people are working on farms and in telecommunications and sort of off the normal working area, and we should be trying to make their businesses thrive in ways that we have just not explored.
I think it's important from a position of economic diversity. I think it's important from a position of entrepreneurship. I think it's important from an innovation-based economic development perspective, as well as all the other tangents that Brian touched on, specifically around education, right? That's something, I mean, education is something we do really well here. I think we want to continue doing that well, and that means access to infrastructure, but as we've already discussed this evening, there are costs around access to infrastructure. There are costs here. It's still a priority. All right, anything else about broadband?
Okay, well, thank you. It certainly is a big issue, especially for, I mean, businesses have dealt with it for years, so.
It's access and then cost, affordability.
If we can't grow without broadband, our choices become pretty stark.
Eli, did you want to comment?
Yeah, for a quick comment. I work as a web developer, and internet is vitally important for me.
Of course.
Most of my clients are out of state, so I'm bringing in, basically, most of my income I'm bringing in to the state of Vermont from out of state. And unfortunately, I don't get a discount on my taxes for that. But I have dealt with Fairpoint before, and one time it took them a month to figure out where I lived. And another time when I was living on Halpin Road, I had 2 lines so that I could switch back and forth because it would take them days to repair anything. And I would call up tech support, and they couldn't communicate directly with the people who were doing the repairs. So to summarize, Fairpoint is the most disorganized organization I've ever dealt with. So please keep that in mind when thinking about them.
It reminds me of winter. When I talk to people, they all have stories about Fairpoint, and they all want to share them, and they smile as they describe things that you described.
Yeah. I'm getting great service from Comcast. I have a business class account with Comcast, and it always works.
Maybe the thing I should do is move out of town and find Comcast. I think that would not be a good outcome for me. But.
Or at least maybe the negotiation with, or the discussion with Fairpoint has informed us for relationship with another vendor, so it's purposeful.
Potentially, we're looking at a full range of options right now, and whether or not Fairpoint has a role in the future, I'm sure they'll have a role at some level. I just don't know what that is. They don't know what that is yet.
It has this monopoly status, though. I mean, if most recent data I saw from Columbia University showed that if you look at cities in the United States, roughly 4% of neighborhoods have monopoly. So for ISP, so 96% of them have competition. When you look at the countryside, almost half of us have monopoly provider.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't have to explain why that's a bad thing. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
And responses, I appreciate that.
Okay, I want to go back to Select Board's report on discontinuance of Adirondack View Drive. And we need to make our final decision on the order of discontinuance of Town Highway number 59 Adirondack View. And if you remember right, on the August 23rd meeting, we directed Town Council to prepare the order of discontinuance for Adirondack View, including the language authorizing Kathleen, the town manager, to execute a quitclaim deed conveying the land to Middlebury College, as well as a bill of sale and other appropriate documents to convey the town's interest in the water and sewer infrastructure underlying the road.
I'll move that we approve the order of discontinuance.
Moved?
Second.
And seconded? Moved and seconded. Any comments? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to approve the order of discontinuance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. So back to committee reports. And was there anything that you wanted to highlight, Laura, in your public safety committee?
Well, given the lateness, no, except for the noise ordinance discussion, where we really are trying to help residents identify how complaints should be lodged, to whom, and tracked, and who they can go to if they don't get a response in a reasonable time. So we had a lot of discussion around that I thought was purposeful, so we're getting there.
Good point.
Can I ask a question about that, even though we're really late? Because I actually did it all at the wrong time. Eli, you made the comment that you went down to the police station, and when you went to do your report the next day, someone declined to hear it?
Yes.
So, is there a mechanism that we bring that to someone's attention under public safety? Since it was a safety issue in terms of biking and it wasn't heard, should we bring this to the chief's attention that there was an incident where what we consider to be a...
I think it would be good to bring up in public safety.
I'm sorry, I apologize for doing it out of order, but I didn't think of it quickly enough when Eli said it, and I don't think it should go unnoted that he actually brought this to our attention. I think there should be some follow-up that's formal to it, that's all.
I think since that incident has happened, Eli, that Chief Hanley has been really an advocate for bike safety, and he's spent a lot of time with us on developing the new bike ordinance, which is much stronger than what we've had before.
Yeah, it was 9 years ago, and I think there's a lot more effort within the cycling community now to obey traffic laws and work with everybody a lot better. And I think it's starting to pay off, and we're starting to get more respect from law enforcement because of that.
And I think if you found that someone on staff wasn't doing that, that you could talk with Chief indirectly or with Kathleen, and they could rectify that.
Right.
Okay, Donna, on the Policy Review Committee, anything that you wanted to bring out there? There's a bunch of stuff that you, in our packet,
So I know it's late, but I did summarize this in one page that I could read through really quickly. Just, I don't know if you had questions about it. No one had a question about it?
Not me.
Actually, there'd be no reason for me to read the page. If you're telling me you have no questions.
I thought it was very clear what was coming through, but I can't speak for everybody else.
I'd like to have you go through and make your points.
Okay, thank you.
Go for it.
So back in June, mid-June, the Policy Committee was asked to look at a public art display ordinance for Middlebury. At the time, it wasn't clear whether we should develop a policy or an ordinance for the displaying of art. The action was actually taken in response to Don Gould, the owner of Donnie's Doors, being denied a public assemblage permit to display, as he claimed not to sell, his doors on the sidewalk in front of the Folk Life Center. From the outset, our committee made the assumption that the purpose of the display was sales, that the only displaying of art which does not lead to sales are that art that is hung in museums, okay? Anything that's in a gallery or otherwise displayed is normally for sale. So at the June 14th meeting, we examined the information and we decided to look at the public art. We gathered information from other towns about an art ordinance. It became immediately apparent that that was an incredibly complicated, interesting ordinance. The first problem is defining art. Is it visual, auditory, tactile? Is it all of the above? Who says it's art? How are the decisions made? And you would need to impanel an art committee to look at the whole problem. So we decided that we would go back and look at maybe the regulation and uses of public space, because he was at the time asking to use a public space. The next meeting was a complete discussion about public spaces, and once again, after much discussion, the committee realized that we were wandering into a very complicated territory having to do with First Amendment rights. So we decided to go back to what the problem was, and that was public safety and commercial activities on sidewalks. All right. At the next meeting, we examined the current vending ordinance, and we came to the conclusion that that was the appropriate place to go in terms of addressing the problem that Mr. Gould had actually encountered. We came to the conclusion that our ordinance was very wordy and very unclear. It appeared to have been developed actually to maybe regulate food trucks. The title of the ordinance, to regulate street vending, peddling, soliciting, and displaying, and other commercial activity, was problematic in that it attempted to name everything, and by virtue of that would obviously leave something out that wouldn't be included in it. So we decided the real purpose of the ordinance was to regulate Very simply, commercial activity on public property. We spent a great deal of time in several meetings to clean up the policy. We took steps forward and backwards, as we do with things like that. They're never exactly simple. But we cleaned up the ordinance. You have a marked-up copy, and then we had a final copy. We sent that ordinance, the marked-up copy, to Chief Hanley and asked him to please look at it. His comments on that were that it was very clear, very straightforward. His only comments were, did a sandwich board constitute publicizing something for commercial gain, and were the flower boxes apt to be construed as for public gain? The committee discussed that, and we said no to both of those. We feel that flower boxes don't need to be included in the commercial ordinance. We also, in cleaning up the document, made it clear that commercial activity would have only two exceptions. One referenced the public assemblage permit, by which you might be selling something under the auspices of the event, but not separately or not ongoing as a commercial activity, and the BMP sidewalk sales, which take place twice a year. We also looked at the town of Middlebury and defined it by the same map references that are used for the alcohol ordinance and the other ordinances we have in order to be consistent. I think that one of the things I want to make clear about this is that the ordinance was streamlined to be made crystal clear to anyone who read it, so that they could not read it and be confused by it. It's not intended to preclude future commercial vending ordinances which might come to our attention. The example that comes to mind is a food truck. We've looked at food truck ordinances around different communities. They're very specific only to food trucks. It has to do with licensing of the vehicle. It has to do with health regulations for food industry. So if at some point the town wants to examine that, if we were petitioned to do so, we could do that. But in the meantime, we feel that the ordinance, as we have submitted it to the Select Board, which we hope you will agree, is clear and covers what we were asked to do. That was said really fast.
Wow, that was a very good summary.
That was nice, actually, because it clarified some stuff. That's why I wanted you to go through it. So one quick question back to the, did you say the sandwich boards then are lawful because they're?
What he meant was if a sandwich board is, it could be even on your own property, is it promoting your business necessarily? It shouldn't be construed as, if it's not on a sidewalk to draw in business, if it's like your menu, we would not consider that sandwich board in front of your business to be a commercial activity.
What if it's just got your company name on it or something?
I think that would be done by signs for the town. You would have to determine, that would be a sign ordinance. There are lots of regulations regarding signs in the town. I don't think you can just put up any kind of sign outside your business. I'm pretty sure you can't. The only thing that we really dealt with was public space, whether it's a sidewalk, a street, parking places, the town green, anything is a public space. We then defined what the public space was by virtue of the maps of the town of Middlebury and said, there's no commercial activity allowed in these.
So we don't want commercial activity on any of those spaces? Is that what our position is on that?
I don't think that's our position. Our position is that we don't allow commercial activity in any of those spaces at this time. It could be in the future that you say, hey, we're going to have an art ordinance. And if there were an art ordinance, you might designate one spot as the appropriate spot for the art that's going to be displayed. That's contingent on a separate ordinance. In the meantime, if you allowed one activity, you would have to say it's open to any kind of activity. So we said, no, there's no commercial activity on public spaces at this time.
Did was it Lori Mackey?
Yeah, the hot dog
Lori
cart?
Mackey attended.
Testify, because
She
she
did.
had kind of petitioned us about it, the sandwich truck, or the hot dog stand.
I spoke to Lori Mackey. She came to our meeting. We spoke to her at great length, and she left. When she left, I think she was very happy. I suggested that she talk both to Nancy Malcolm in terms of the planning, the town plan, and also to the zoning board, okay? Her interest was, and her first encounter that she was dismayed by was on private property. It wasn't on public property. And so we don't regulate that issue. It's a safety issue. And I said if she had concerns about that, that, it needed to go in a different direction. It wasn't our purview being charged with public spaces. We don't allow food trucks or food vendors in our public spaces at this point. And we would have to write an ordinance if we wanted to do that.
Right.
We would have to actually develop and write a very specific ordinance in order to handle that. And so by precedent, we've said no, there's no commercial activity.
Unless they're part of an event. Because we had the food
That's
trucks.
a public assemblage permit.
Right. That's- I'm just
And therefore, it's a
making sure.
completely different thing. Under a public assemblage permit, you might have Spooktacular as an example on the town green, and you may have cider and donuts there. That's not an ongoing commercial activity. It's under the auspices of a public event. It doesn't fall under the commercial vending ordinance.
That's a clear distinction, yeah.
So are we prepared to act on this proposed amendment to our regulate commercial activity on public property ordinance? Is this prepared for the board?
Yes, it
to
is.
act
We're
upon?
submitting it to the board for approval of the public ordinance, commercial vending ordinance as revised and submitted to the select board.
Isn't there a process, doesn't have to be a hearing?
Does it have to
We
be a
typically have
hearing?
had a public hearing.
Okay, so we
Sorry,
should, so
public
we
hearing.
need to post this, so this is what you're proposing and we're ready to go to the public hearing?
Yes,
level.
thank you.
Okay, all right.
Forgot about that little step of public hearing.
Not
So
tonight.
it'd be, we're starting the process.
Yes.
Starting a process.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Any-
out of committee.
Out of committee, okay, thank you. Heather, did you have anything you wanted to highlight on Energy Committee?
Just quickly, I apologize for the lateness of the inclusion in the packet, but didn't realize that the minutes were not included until late last night, so Kathleen added them today, the draft minutes from our last meeting. In addition, I also asked her to post a media release regarding from the Vermont Department of Public Service Energy Plan standards. They're in a public review process for that people can make comment on, and I think for final release around the 1st of November. It's up there, so you can make review and comment until October 20th, and then make their recommendations will come out by the 1st of November. There is also, we received training regarding trip diaries, which is also included. If anyone was at all interested, the Energy Committee is tasked with recording 3 days over the next month of vehicles we make in our personal vehicle without trying to prejudice it by making adjustments so that we can have an accurate view of how people use their vehicle. And then the hope would be to take this to, for instance, East Middlebury, and offer training to East Middlebury residents for them to document how they travel, and that would then become supporting documentation for possibly getting leverage for an Actar bus stop in that area. So it would be potentially data for use in things like that in the future. And also allow the Energy Committee to train other people, and just to make a more conscious effort on what our behavior is and how we use our cars and where we could make changes and save on fuel and so forth. One just other quick note, we are on pause with the energy, a town energy plan, because we did not receive by our meeting the memo we anticipated from the Director of Planning and Zoning. And that's pretty much it in a quick nutshell, unless anyone has questions.
Questions of Heather? Okay, thanks, Heather. Town College lunch, the notes are in here. If there's any questions, I'll entertain them. I asked Donna to join us on this because a big part of the discussion was about the downtown bridge, and she's one of our key point people on that. And really no decisions came out of the meeting. It was more informative in nature, sharing with the college about our review that they'd read about and knew well about. They have a participant on a review of our Middlebury Business Development Fund, and then talking about the update on the downtown bridge replacement. And so those are the two big items of discussion. We talked about those in depth, but like I said, more information sharing and making sure that we're tracking. No questions, I'll ask. Yep, go ahead.
I think it's great that Donna had a turn to go, and I could see that it was aligned with a project that she's worked on, and I just wanted to look at how we decide membership for that lunch going forward, and what your thought was about that.
We continue to try to circulate, revolve, so that and while at the same time driving it towards who's the subject matter expert on what is on the agenda. So I feel like I actually looked at with Kathleen, who's gone, and it's kind of been good. It's been sequential, so it hasn't been populated by the same person multiple times. So I guess unless we feel it's not being fairly dispersed, then I'm going to continue with that, because it's not really until the week before when we share with the college what we know what the agenda is, and so it's kind of short notice. I think I called Don, get a hold of Donna the day before the lunch, and so because we just had finalized the agenda for discussion, so it's tough to plan it out, but I have a very strong commitment to inclusiveness and giving everybody a chance. And actually, one of the things we're going to talk about doing, and we're going to do it this time, but it didn't work because we had the bridge meeting ahead of time, is to meet maybe a little bit earlier, and then have everybody have an invite to come in and maybe just talk and spend some time having discussions with the college staff on to basically have our meeting and about the particular agenda, but then have an open meeting for the rest of the select board to come in. And so it was actually Kathleen's idea. I thought it was a great idea. I endorsed it fully. It just didn't work this time because we had already tied them down for 3 hours, and that was so we would have been asking for too much time of theirs. But we're going to try that the next time, because there may be things that aren't necessarily agenda items, but that we ought to be contacting and touching base with them on. And where everybody's a committee head of something, they can talk about that particular item.
I think I see the issue of the time crunch and things like that. If there is an opportunity for the board to talk about it and the timing works out, it would be nice. What would be nice for me is to actually be able to send whoever goes with a lot of support from the board, that, by not being involved in the decision, then we never get to support that person too and say, of course, that was the right person. And it's just a little step that means something to whoever gets to go. It would be nice to take it to that level. But I understand the timing, and I understand the constraints, and I do like the idea of the extra thing. It's a nice thing to go with the full support of your board and not feel like you're the third person that other people might feel good about you going and don't. Like, I just want to get it out of that category. I think it still sort of feels like this mystery, and I don't, for me, it just seems kind of weird that it's a mystery. So,
Right.
And
the other way would be to do a duty roster.
yeah, I mean, I don't feel like it has to be anything, like, I don't want it to be an issue anymore.
Actually, you might do that, and then look at the agenda and see if you have to adjust it from that. That way you're not laboring over it.
I'll probably do that, because to be honest with you, I didn't labor over it much, but I did want to make sure that it was being fair.
Yeah. I mean, my dad always talked about, who was going to get overtime, and he called low man on the totem pole,
Yeah.
and it was very clear to everybody who was going in next, and
We'll probably look at doing that then.
Yeah,
So.
whatever
All
works.
right, anyway, thank you.
So I have the attendance record since
Yeah.
2014. and I've updated them as we've gone on,
Should be
so
pretty clear.
it's all queued up.
Yes.
Nick, your MBDF review, anything you wanted to share with us on that?
Just that we had our first meeting last Friday, the 23rd, and our purpose was to make sure we all clearly understood the task objective, and the task objective is to, as we're approaching the 5-year period of the MBDF position, to evaluate the factors that led to its creation. You know, why do we do it in the first place? You know, what the objectives and assumptions we had when we started the position, what the accomplishments have been, and then this will ultimately lead to, we expect to be a white paper that will make a summary of where we've been and then recommendations to move forward. The recommendations will most likely fit under one of 3 categories. It is continuing as is, continuing with modifications, or terminating, and that's what we are focusing on. It needs to be emphasized that this is on the position. This is not a personnel issue. This is purely on the position itself. We spent a fair bit of our time in the last meeting just discussing why we did this position in the first place, and there was a lot of good institutional knowledge on that. What we're going to do, we're having our next meeting is on Friday, 9:30, and our plan then is to put together a list of people who we can go and meet with and interview and find out what their experience has been with the position. You know, largely a lot of business individuals, business community that we've had members already suggesting. If anybody has somebody in mind you'd like us to include in the list, please, if you could send it to Kathleen, because she's compiling the list, and then we'll have that, and then we will put out assignments for who's going to do the meetings. What we're also going to do is assemble a list of questions, so if you have a question that you think should be in the list, we're trying to sort of normalize or equalize the meetings, or the interviews, so that we're getting some consistency in the responses. So if you could do either of those, it'd be great. After that, we'll have a meeting that will actually look at what the accomplishments have been, and maybe 1, 2, we don't know how many yet, whatever it takes, and then we'll start putting together our conclusions. My goal is to have this done by the 1st of December, so as we get into the budget season, we have that information.
Maybe you should hire the ladder truck subcommittee. Well laid out.
They're actually on
spreadsheet.
the top of the list for interviewing. And I'm taking
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Yeah, and actually, we're using the same grading system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the only thing I would add is the members of the committee, just so everybody's aware, Tom Corbin, Jared Moats, Nick, Donna, Ken Perrine, and then myself and Kathleen are also in the room.
Are in the room as part of this,
Yes.
the initiative review subcommittee? Oh, okay. I saw the ad for Middlebury Next, which is a thank you, and I think, right?
Yeah.
And I've always been curious about the transition to Middlebury Next, like where that came from as a brand, because I would ask maybe members of the committee to ask who they interview, how they feel about that branding.
That's a great question. Yeah.
And whether it works, or whether we need to, it's a time to reconsider it.
Okay.
I would just like to make the comment that it's one of the best first meetings I've ever attended. And I think that you had the 2 documents that were in here that's in our packet tonight, if you had a chance to look at them, which was the introduction and the tasks, objectives of the project outline. And I think it was real important that Nick did that. Kudos to that, because we're on a fairly short timeline. And I think the public should also consider, at any point, anyone that wants to make a comment should certainly send it in. And we're happy to look at it, because I think that the whole idea is a period of discovery, which is why the next task is interviewing key people in the community that have been involved in businesses. What do they see? What do they think are important? What works? What hasn't worked? All of the above. But the initial meeting was, I thought, just really terrific, because we got through all of the history of the how it developed. And I think that was really important to understand the context for the position.
And I think, and this is my own opinion, we haven't talked about this for the next meeting, but as far as the interviews,
Yeah.
the way I'm personally envisioning, but obviously we'll have a discussion of that among our group, is when we do our interviews, we're not going to record it. At least I see that this person said this. I think that that's not relevant as to who said it. What's relevant is it gets said. And so I envision we would probably have a list of those who assisted us, but then as far as any specific comments they had, that's an open, whether we put in an appendice or we integrate it into the white paper, I don't know that yet. But so the purpose of that comment is, if there are things you want to say about it, don't be reluctant to come forward. We're not going to say, Susan said this. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Susan always says that.
Okay, well, I mean, people read between the lines and go, that was Susan's line, we know that.
Any other questions of Nick? We still got more on the agenda, guys.
I'm done.
So, contract for pool house siding and window replacement.
Okay.
Thanks, Jamie.
As outlined in the agenda notes, we received 2 bids for the pool house siding and window replacement project, one for $14,400 and one for $41,950. The Infrastructure Committee recommended going with the low bidder from the project. In some follow-up conversations, Judith Harris, who is going to be our clerk of the works on the project, found that Mr. Miller's bid did not include 2 windows, and she recommended increasing the quality of the windows. So the adjusted bid from Mr. Miller, the low bidder, was $16,900, and based on his references and the quality of his work, Judith recommends going forward with that. Since that was a change from what the Infrastructure Committee saw, I contacted both Susan and Heather and discussed the timing of the project, particularly with the winter coming, 5-week lead time on the ordering of the doors, and they were concurred with the recommendation to go forward.
Yeah. They were similar enough, it wasn't even close to the other bid, and it stayed within the recommendations that we all had, that Judith was to take a look at it. So I don't think anyone in Infrastructure Committee would have an issue with that.
Do you want to make a motion?
I would love to make a motion. Did you want to say something, Heather? No, okay.
Okay.
I would like to make the motion to award the contract for the pool house siding and window replacement project to the low bidder, Robert Miller, for a total cost of $16,900.
I'll second.
Moved and second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Director of Planning and Zoning
Yes.
request.
Jennifer Murray, our Director of Planning and Zoning, is asking for the board to appoint Victor Sinidanowski as the Deputy Zoning Administrative Officer for a 3-year term.
So moved.
So second.
Moved and seconded.
Second.
We have one here.
All right.
Do the second.
All right, well,
I'd say you're voting for. So, any comments? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to appoint Victor as the town's Deputy Zoning Administrative Officer, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Okay, and the next agenda item, update on Attorney Dumont's letter regarding Vermont Gas, was requested by a couple of board members. You saw in your packet a letter from Vermont Gas Council, and I asked our council, Benj Putnam, is going to be providing guidance to our zoning administrator as well. And he wanted me to let you know that his initial assessment is that zoning permits are probably not applicable to most, if not all, of the facilities being proposed by Vermont Gas. And his opinion will be coming.
Thank you.
So does that mean that they didn't need to pursue zoning for, like, the public right-of-way, but they do for private crossings?
I don't know. That is what he
Okay.
gave me.
Questions? Okay. So we changed our fall meeting schedule, right?
Right, you asked me to propose a meeting schedule avoiding meeting on the general election day, and so included in your packet, I have proposed meetings in November on the 15th and 29th, which helps us avoid Thanksgiving week.
The 85 then. LB
And
85.
actually works out nicely for December,
day?
giving us
Which
a
day?
2-week gap between the 29th and the 13th of December. So that's my proposal for your discussion. And I updated the budget timeline based on that as well. And as you heard this evening, we're looking for a public meeting on the railroad downtown bridge project the first week in November or so that would free that night up for that.
Personal
Is that
side.
gonna work for everybody, 15, 22, 29?
No meeting on the
No
20th.
22.
No 22.
15, 29, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent solution. I think this is good.
Okay.
Should we, and so in December, we'll meet on the 13th and 27th?
We'll meet on, typically the board has not met over the holiday weeks, but we do analyze that on the 13th.
Okay.
And on occasion, we have met on like the 20th.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good.
While we have the schedule up, I would also just like to put out for the future for the 28th of February. That conflicts with that first ACSU annual meeting. So if as that gets closer, we can change times or days that, I know it's the meeting before town meeting, but I would like to be able to attend that, so.
So you're thinking like a Monday instead?
Yeah, I would be willing to entertain suggestions from you.
Well, why don't we talk
always
about
like
it
that.
now, and I can just update if that's agreeable to everyone.
Yeah.
Do it Monday
Because I'd like
night.
to go
And
as
then
well.
I can just keep that right on the schedule, that February
Do that.
28th, it'll be the school meeting, and then we'll meet on the 27th.
Yep. That would work for me.
Thank you.
So you don't want to do December right now while we're at it?
No, because
Well, December is dependent on how
we're doing.
Okay.
productive we are in November, right?
Yeah, we know we're meeting in February. There's no getting out of it.
Okay, check warrants?
Oh, I've reviewed the check warrants and find them in good order. They're big. We have $3,149,190.75. Of that, almost $2 million was for our bonds payments, so, and a big chunk for the Weber Street sewer and Creek Road work that we've seen in progress. So I move that we approve the
Second.
check warrants.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the check warrants, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, Kathleen.
Don't have anything to add, just that we are circulating a survey on the Creek Road erosion stability study, and there had initially been a public meeting planned for this Wednesday. There is no public meeting on that project plan for this Wednesday. It will be scheduled probably in October.
Great. Board member concerns. Victor? Donna?
Nothing, thank you.
Just quickly, I noticed in the Addison County Regional Planning Commission update newsletter that was in the packet on like page 5, there was a workshop scheduled titled Rivers and Roads Tier 2 Road Scholar Workshop down at the Rutland Town Garage. I'm assuming that's like a town highway department type, but I didn't know if they were aware of that opportunity and if we were sending anyone, so I just, it sounded like it was a good fit with all we're doing with Creek Road, and, or even if it was something our new guy, sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Bill, sorry, was interested in, and so I just wanted to bring it to Kathleen's attention. And then also just what came up as part of Eli's comments regarding bicycle incidents. For every bicyclist that has a story, even in my 2 or 3 short years of driving commercial vehicle, I have as many stories from my perspective that I have not shared. So I would just like to remind people that I also have a different perspective and stories in that department, so. But I won't share them now.
Do you mean with regard to incidents with cyclists,
Yes.
Heather? Yeah, I know. Yeah, what you.
And I'm still gonna get that GoPro and wear it, and so I can record them. It's just like anything.
Yeah.
You know, there's always people following the rules, and there are always people not following the rules. It doesn't matter what you're talking about, so.
Nick?
Nothing.
Laura?
I have an invitation to our board and to Kathleen to participate in the International Walk and Bike to School Day next Wednesday, October 5th. So it's a big one. We do it every month at Mary Hogan School, and it's always the first Wednesday of the month, rain or shine. But this particular one is important for a number of reasons. First, the international effort is really trying to get mayors throughout the country to participate, or local officials. So they'd really like to see our participation in this particular one. And what that means is the possibility of you joining one of the walking school bus routes. We have 3, but I really recommend that if you do join us for this, and I hope you will consider it, that you join the one that starts in front of the state offices on Court Street. It's 153, I think, you know, the yellow building right there, and they assemble by 7:40 in the morning, and then you walk to Mary Hogan School down Court Street, and you're there by 8 o'clock and you're done. You know, so it's 15 minutes of the morning. It would make a big impact if you could come for that. So if you consider that, that would be great. We'll be rewarding kids with reflective patches for that particular walk and roll to school day to remind them again that it's important to be visible, and that actually reflection is more important at night than color, and color you need for the day. So yellow is the easiest color to see from a distance, and gray is the hardest. So a lot of our kids are wearing gray and black, but anyway, we try to teach that from the time that they're in grade school up, so that we can see changed behavior of our pedestrians and our cyclists, and that they are engaging with our motorists safely. So that's the aim, and it dovetails with the Way to Go Commuter Challenge, which happens, just started on Monday, and overlaps with that particular walk and roll to school day. And this time, the Way to Go Challenge invited schools to participate, and we enrolled. And if we get at least 50% participation on one of those days, we're eligible for a solar tracker, which we'd love to have for Mary Hogan School. We're well positioned to win that. I want to win it for the school. So your participation next week will be exciting and could help us. So that's the invitation. And there is a yellow sheet in your packet with the backup on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
I've signed on Let's win that thing for Laura, that's what I That's all I have.
Okay. Apologize for a very lengthy select board meeting. We're an hour behind, but we still have an executive session. Susan?
In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of a personnel matter would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the personnel matter in public. Anybody?
Seconded. Nick? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss the personnel matter under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
I'll second that, too.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Dick, thank you very much.